Chapter 65. For the current Rulon Group's leader, Kazuma Kirishima, Ryudo's feelings were somewhat complicated. In Red Album 2, no one survived. He stayed in prison the whole time, and he didn't even have a portrait. At most, he was just a passerby. But in this world, Kazuma was a living person, and he was the father of this body. The old saying said that blood is thicker than water. But although Ryudo's body was Kazuma's blood, his soul was not. Under such circumstances, if Long Do were to call a stranger father, it would be somewhat awkward. However, now that the blood father had appointed him to visit the prison, Ryudo couldn't choose not to go, so he could only go to the Tokyo nesting duck prison. So early in the morning of the next day, Ryudo happily skipped class and got into the car to go to the nesting duck prison. According to the original plan, today Ryudo should be looking for his last partner, Takayama Masato. But since his father had something to look for, then he should go and visit him. After all, he was the father of this body. Soon after, Ryudo came to the nesting duck prison, located in the suburbs of Tokyo, which was also a place where people in the underworld were afraid to talk about. Some reports could be seen from many places, saying that the prison conditions in Japan were better than many places, which was indeed a fact. First of all, the 3 meals in the prison were guaranteed, and the inside was clean and tidy, safe and orderly, which could be said to be very thoughtful. But the members of the extreme path who really squatted in there knew that the prison in Japan destroyed people's spirit and caused indelible psychological damage. In this damn place, even looking at the guards will be punished. Looking up during the meal will be punished. Closing your eyes when you shouldn't be closing your eyes will be punished. Opening your eyes when you shouldn't be opening your eyes will still be punished. On the first day, I was asked to memorize the entire prison manual. It stipulated how my feet should be raised, how much angle should I raise my hand. And when I sleep, I can only lie on my side or face up. I can't lie face down, and I can't cover my face. Otherwise, I will be punished. In any case, it is very, very oppressive inside. Without the permission of the prison guards, you are not allowed to do anything other than breathe. The above description came from the personal experience of a senior of the Rulon Group, who had been in the nesting duck prison for 5 years. At that time, his vivid descriptions and painful tone had left a deep impression on Ryudo. However, that team leader Tong Shunyima's sentence was not a short 5 years, but 6 times the sentence of 30 years. Because he was charged with multiple crimes such as serious intentional injury, intentional homicide, and assault on the police, Ima had a high probability of being sentenced to death. But because of his good relationship with a lawyer, it was changed to 30 years in prison. But from a realistic point of view, 30 years of imprisonment was not much different from the death penalty. After all, many death row prisoners in Japan had been in prison for decades without being executed. In the end, they still died of old age. When Ryudo arrived at the heavily guarded prison, he filled out all the forms and waited for another hour before he was let through the door. The prison guards obviously did not welcome Ryudo's arrival. But after all, he was visiting according to the formal procedures, so they could only give permission. Wait here. After coldly leaving such a sentence, the guard stood next to him and stared at Ryudo with the eyes of a prisoner. From the appearance, Ryudo's dyed yellow hair did indeed look like a delinquent youth. In addition, he had a close blood relationship with the prison's big criminal, Tong Shunyima, which naturally made the guards nervous. In this visiting room, separated by an iron window in the middle, not long after, the opposite door was slowly opened, and a tall figure walked in with steady steps. In his memory, Ryudo's father's face was actually a bit vague, but he vaguely remembered that his figure was very tall, giving people a feeling of indomitable spirit. But now in the prison, even if Yima was wearing a prison uniform and had a buzz cut, the expression on his face and the aura on his body were still the same as in his memory, and he walked with a straight back. A man should be like this, regardless of whether it was good or bad. Indomitable spirit. A dragon trapped in the shallows is still a dragon, and will not become a shrimp crawling because of this. You're here. Today seems to be Tuesday, don't you have class? When the Rulon Group's team leader sat on the stool, facing his son through the iron window, his first sentence was unexpectedly this. For some reason, Yima gave Ryudo the feeling that he did not feel like he was in prison, but like he was in his daily work state, and suddenly saw his son appear in front of him. Pfft! Ha 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 ha! So Ryudo could not help but laugh, and the austere atmosphere in the visiting room became a lot more lively. Sorry, today I slightly skipped class. You won't spank me, right? If there was no iron window in the middle, maybe I would do that. That's really comforting. For the first time I feel that prison is a good place. For a time, the father and son actually chatted like this, giving the feeling that they were chatting at home, completely ignoring the serious atmosphere in the prison and the surrounding guards. However, when he heard Ryudo's voice getting louder and louder, the guard who was responsible for monitoring him next to him could not help but say, "Hey, lower your voice, you can't make noise in prison." In an instant, Ryudo turned his head slightly and looked at the guard with a sharp gaze. The current Ryudo was not the ordinary person who just crossed over. In just 3 days, he confronted Tenmu Ayam, fought with the cat house, threw Sakata out of the second floor in public, killed the mercenaries with his own hands, and so on. After experiencing these big events that ordinary people could not imagine in their lifetime, his momentum has gradually become like a big boss, like a carp that leaped over the dragon gate. Therefore, this gaze was so sharp that the guard who was glanced at could not help but shrink back, as if an invisible knife had been placed on his neck. That's enough, don't make it difficult for him. He is just doing a job to support his family. After noticing Longdo's actions, Ima slowly opened his mouth to stop him. It's okay. I don't plan to do anything, don't worry. You don't plan to do anything? Or have you already done it? I've heard about the incident with Sakata. Although Yima was a little happy to see his grown-up son after a long time, he still put on a serious expression and mentioned the business he wanted to discuss with his son. Chapter 66. 3 days ago, the young master of the Rulon Group, Ryudo Kiryu, single-handedly resolved Sakata Minoru's rebellion. Not only was this miraculous deed widely spread outside, even the people in the Nest-Duck prison were secretly discussing it. With Akima's identity, he naturally had his own channels to collect information, and he was more aware of the ins and outs of the matter. After understanding that his father was about to get down to business, Ryudo also nodded solemnly and replied, "Indeed, after all, there are some things that have to be done. I understand, you were also forced to do so. I can only blame myself for not dealing with things properly before coming in." As for Sakata's rebellion, Akima actually didn't expect it beforehand, and now that he thought about it, he felt some lingering fear. Although his son was sitting in front of him, alive and kicking, Akima could also imagine how much bloodshed he had experienced before coming here alive. If Sakata had colluded with outsiders, then the first thing he would have done was to eliminate Ryudo. But Ryudo was not killed, but instead he killed Sakata. This ability was far beyond Akima's understanding of his son. "I've always wanted you to stay away from extreme Tao, stay away from the Rulon Group, and live an ordinary life, but now it seems that I was too naive." Having said that, Akima couldn't help but sigh, and at the same time, he unconsciously shook his head. Akima lost his parents when he was young, and spent his youth in an orphanage. Later, he was adopted by an extreme Tao boss, and since then, he embarked on the path of extreme Tao for his adoptive father. As for his life, although he knew that he had always been on the wrong path, he never regretted it. Because from the beginning to the end, Akima had no other choice. Whether it was because of friendship or loyalty, he could only go down this path to the end. Once you entered the extreme Tao industry, you could not leave it for the rest of your life. It was precisely because he knew that this path was a dead end that Akima did everything he could to get Ryudo out of it. But now it seemed that this was impossible. Even if Ichiro was dead, as long as the Rulon Group was still around, there would be people who wanted Ryudo's life. Even if the Rulon Group was gone, many people would not let go of Ryudo. He still had to die. However, after hearing his father's words, Ryudo shook his head and smiled. "You're right. It's just that the enemy is too strong. The enemy, the one behind Sakata? Although Yima didn't know about the existence of eternal concubine Amami, but from the matter of him going to prison, he could also feel that there was a huge invisible hand behind him pushing everything to happen. That's right. Your imprisonment should also be caused by that person. Unless we can match her, we won't be able to live according to our own wishes. At this point, Ryudo couldn't help but look up, as if he wanted to see the distant sky through the ceiling of the visitation room. Whether it was Ichiro's predicament, Ryudo's predicament, or Colored Glaze's predicament, in the end, it was caused by the lack of strength. Only with sufficient strength could humans freely choose their own way of living, and not be forced to go with the flow by the general trend. Suddenly Ryudo said, "Pops, I will find a way to get you out of here. You shouldn't continue to be imprisoned like this." "I'm afraid it's a bit difficult. It's not a question of whether it's difficult or not, but whether it's necessary." In this cold nesting duck prison, Ryudo stood up and looked at his father for the last time. He smiled and said, "I'll go first. I hope to see you outside soon." After saying this, Ryudo looked at the guards with a, "Are you trying to break out of prison?" Under the vigilant gaze of the guards, he swaggered out of the door and enjoyed the prestige of a gangstar. Wait. Originally, Longdo planned to say, "The wind is bleak and the water is cold. My son has left and never returned." He left behind a handsome back and disappeared. Who knew that Ima would call out to him at the last moment? Is there anything else? After all, the person who interrupted him was his father, so Ryudo could only obediently turn his head and look. Although your physical fitness is good, you haven't received proper martial arts training since you were young, so you can't use your strength. Go find an old man called Furamaki Sotaro. He is the master of Furamaki-style martial arts, and is also my master. He can train you to be a talent. After throwing down these words, Ima also stood up from the stool, leaving behind a back view that said, "The wind is blowing and the water is cold. This old man will leave and never return." He directly left Longdo's line of sight. "Good guy. You're still the best at acting." After being intimidated by Ima's handsome back, Longdo was also escorted out by the guards, as if he was a plague. Furamaki Sotaro is his father's teacher? On the way back, Ryudo kept thinking about what Ichiro said. Actually, even without Ichiro's reminder, Ryudo knew where his problem was. Although he had a LV3 physique, professional expert level physical fitness, but in other aspects, he was only at the level of a normal delinquent. A person's combat ability was mainly composed of physique, mentality, combat experience, and combat skills. Other than the first two, Ryudo was a complete mess in the last two. His fists were not good, and he did not know how to use knives or pistols. It was a waste of his good physique, let alone the mercenaries from yesterday. Even if he faced a grandmaster of combat who was not as good as him, there was a high probability that he would not be their opponent. After all, the other person had seriously trained. His imitation of the tortoise fist style was completely like a monkey show to a real martial artist. If he really fought, he would be broken. So Ryudo also thought about whether or not he should find a dojo to train. Who knew that his father would recommend him a master who sounded amazing? Furamaki-style martial arts grandmaster, Furamaki Sotaro. Good guy. Looking at the aura of this sect, looking at the name of this grandmaster, it felt like a hidden master. Suddenly, the image of an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion appeared in Longdo's mind. He was sitting alone in a dojo meditating. Narukai, mobilize all the intelligence under the Rulon group and search the entire Tokyo area for an old man called Furamaki Sotaro. Yes, I will go immediately. So after getting off the car, Ryudo immediately ordered Narukai Otani to mobilize his brothers to search for the old man. After all, the Rulon group's intelligence network was very powerful. It should not be difficult to find a master with a name. In fact, it was not difficult. On the same night, Ryudo received the whereabouts of the Grandmaster, Furamaki Sotaro. And according to his brother's report, the Grandmaster was now dancing in a nightclub. Chapter 67. The night was special for the Japanese. It was a good time to free themselves from the busy work and take the initiative to indulge in the bright neon lights. Especially at night in Tokyo, it was usually bustling with BMWs and cars. Even in the early morning of the next day, many main streets were still brightly lit. Among them, Ginza was undoubtedly an area rich in nightlife. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, it was the time for bars and nightclubs in Ginza to open. At night, colorful neon lights and fluorescent lights flickered, as if drowning people in the dazzling light and shadow. Just as the night in Ginza gradually became deep, a low-key black car slowly drove to a karaoke hall between 7 Chosum and 8 Chosum. There were quite a few high-end nightclubs in the Ginza area, and this hula jump bar karaoke hall was relatively low-end, so it also gathered a lot of embarrassed guests. Second Hokage, this is the place. As Narukai Otani opened the door, his direct superior, Ryudo, slowly walked out of the car and stood at the door of the hula jump bar karaoke hall. Before entering the door, he had already heard the noise of the dance floor and saw various neon lights flashing with psychedelic colors. There were many similar karaoke halls in Kamashicho, but Ryudo didn't come here to dance. The Furamaki school master actually likes to come to this kind of place. It's hard to understand. After shaking his head, Ryudo walked into the karaoke hall with Narukai. The noisy music, the crazy dancing crowd. Such a place was a bit noisy for Ryudo, and he didn't like it. But in order to find the Furamaki school master, who taught his father, Furamaki Sotaro, he still came here with a gift. Speaking of Furamaki Sotaro, this person was actually not difficult to find. People who often hang around in Ginza have probably seen such a strange old man. When Ryudo saw that figure on the lively dance floor, it was not difficult to understand why he had left a deep impression on so many people. The appearance of this Furamaki sect grandmaster was very different from what he had imagined. From the outside, Furamaki Sotaro looked like an ordinary old Japanese man. He had a short stature and a thin body. His face had a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks. He had the face of a monkey from Mauname. A wisp of a coquettish mustache was combed into the shape of a brush and hung down below his chin. His pale hair was tied into a bun, and the clothes he was wearing were also the old style of the workers of the Showa era. To put it bluntly, Furamaki Sotaro not only did not have the demeanor of a master, but his appearance and dressing were also out of place in this noisy nightclub. So much so that Ryudo and Narukai could see the old man swaying his body on the dance floor, even from a distance. From the perspective of the 5 attributes, this grandmaster's attributes were really a bit awkward. His attributes were like this: name, Furamaki Sotaro, age, 69 years old. Attributes: Wisdom LV2, Physique LV2, Courage LV4, Insight LV4, Charm LV1. Well, in addition to his courage and eyesight, his physique did not look like a martial arts expert at all. Of course, it may be related to his age. This guy, is he really the leader's master? Seeing this Furamaki sect grandmaster wriggling on the dance floor, leaning toward a young lady wearing a short skirt next to him, and pretending to inadvertently rub her butt, Narukai really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But Ryudo shook his head and said seriously, as the saying goes, a great hermit hides in the city. Maybe this grandmaster is the kind of master who has returned to the natural state. Is that so? But no matter how you look at it, he is just a lecherous old man. Don't say that, he still has skills. You see, he has been rubbing that woman's butt for so long, and the woman didn't notice it. Maybe this is a special cultivation method? However, before Ryudo's voice fell, the woman who was being taken advantage of by the Furamaki sect grandmaster seemed to notice something. She turned her head and pointed at the old man's nose and scolded. Second-generation leader, isn't he discovered? And it looks like he is about to be slapped. Ahem, he was indeed discovered, but when this woman slaps him in a while, he will definitely use a handsome body movement to dodge. Pa! Before he finished speaking, a crisp slap had passed through the dance floor and entered the ears of Ryudo and Narukai. The woman who slapped the lecherous old man, after being taken advantage of, left, leaving only Furamaki Sotaro with a red mark on his face, to continue swaying on the dance floor. Looking at his calm and composed appearance, it was as if nothing had happened and everything was just a dream. Such a thick-skinned grandmaster level really made people admire him. Second-generation leader. Don't talk to me for the time being, I have a headache. However, after seeing this scene, Ryudo couldn't help but walk to the bar and ask for a glass of fresh milk with ice. He raised his head and gulped it down. Don't ask why Ryudo asked for fresh milk with ice. It was because he was only 16 years old and was not an adult yet. He couldn't drink indiscriminately and could only drink milk to relieve his worries. Damn it! How could such a decent person like his father have such a lecherous master? And looking at his appearance, he didn't look like he could fight at all. What's going on? After drinking the milk in the glass, Ryudo put the glass on the table and sighed deeply. He seemed to feel that his future was full of troubles, and that he had never met a decent person. However, he didn't know whether it was Ryudo's yellow hair that was too dazzling, or the way he used milk to relieve his worries that was too funny. Therefore, the two young men who looked like gangsters immediately laughed and mocked. Little brat, if you like to drink milk so much, don't come to this kind of place. Go home and drink it. After hearing these words that were obviously looking for trouble, Narukai, who was standing behind Ryudo, couldn't hold it in anymore. Hey, are the two of you looking for? Wait, don't do it here. Just as Narukai Otani was about to press the two young men on the table and teach them a lesson, Ryudo stopped him. Sorry, I was rude. I shouldn't have done it at this time. After understanding that the second generation head was doing something important and didn't want to cause trouble, Narukai took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his anger. However, Ryudo shook his head and moved his mouth towards Furamaki Sotaro, who was still having fun on the dance floor not far away. He smiled and said, "If you want to fight, don't fight here. Go to the dance floor and fight." The dance floor? Ah, I understand. Narukai was also a smart person. He immediately understood what Ryudo meant. Therefore, he turned his head and grabbed the two young men's collars without hesitation. Like pulling two chicks, he threw them in the direction of Furamaki Sotaro. Chapter 68. Ryudo's meaning was obvious. Since it was the two punks who came to cause trouble first, he should just do it. Talking to them would be a waste of time. But since he already made a move, he might as well use this opportunity to test if the disco master had any real skills. After all, although Yima had learned a few moves from Furamaki Sotaro, it was many years ago. Who knows if this old man had Alzheimer's? Then wouldn't he be a perverted old man who only knows how to rub people's butts? Bang. Accompanied by two strange sounds, the two punks were grabbed by Narukai and thrown to the ground. Someone is fighting. Oh, good fight. Hurry up and do it. Don't push, just watch the monkey. As the two punks were thrown to the ground, the young people who were dancing on the dance floor quickly moved away. Their faces were even filled with smiles and excitement. In this kind of nightclub, there would be people fighting almost every night. Everyone was used to it. Even the bodyguards in this la-la-ba disco were too lazy to care about the people who were fighting. At most, they would drag someone out and throw them into the garbage after they fell to the ground. Bastard! You! Pwah! The two punks who were thrown to the dance floor by Narukai immediately tried to stand up and fight, but the former directly kicked the unlucky guy on the left in the chest. Although Narukai Otani's current identity was Ryudo's assistant and driver, he was still a veteran in the underworld for many years. Fighting was a common occurrence for him. His kick was fast and ruthless. It was full of momentum. It kicked the guy back like a rubber ball. The most important thing was that Furamaki Sotaro was right behind this guy. TSK. Seeing the punks coming towards him, Furamaki Sotaro couldn't do anything. A glimmer of light flashed through his seemingly old and dim eyes. His entire body flashed to the right with a strange movement technique, nimbly avoiding the unexpected disaster that was about to crash into him. Good guy. At this time, Ryudo, who was carefully watching Furamaki Sotaro, couldn't help but light up. Just now, the old man's movement was very smooth, like a fish in water. In a flash, he bypassed the crowd and arrived at a safe place. Expert, definitely an expert. Even though Long Do's eyes were fixed on the old man, he still couldn't see how the old man moved. He only felt the old man's figure disappear with a whoosh. And, wait, gone. Where did he go? When Long Do came to his senses, he realized that Tai Lang of Gumu Zong had already disappeared into the bustling crowd behind him. No, I have to catch up with him. So Ryudo's figure also quickly rushed in that direction. He directly used his hand to push the crowd and crazily squeezed inside. There were still cheers and shouts coming from the dance floor behind him. Obviously, Narukai was still happily educating the two punks. But Ryudo had already rushed out of the disco's back door in the blink of an eye and came to a slightly gloomy alley. In Tokyo, there were many maze-like alleys with many twists and turns. Many of them were gathering places for vagrants or punks, so ordinary people wouldn't casually enter here. The moment Long Do entered the alley, he saw a few rascals surrounding him and sucking on something. Then, those rascals looked at him strangely. If ordinary people were looked at by this group of drug addicts, they would inevitably feel fear. But Ryudo didn't hesitate to respond with a cold snort. In his view, this group of people with cerebral palsy hiding in the alley was a group of garbage. A group of social garbage that was dirty wherever they went. They were worse than animals. So Ryudo turned his head and looked at the other side of the alley. He just happened to see Furamaki Sotaro's figure that was about to disappear into the darkness. Don't think about running away, unworthy old pervert master. Ryudo also quickly chased in the direction where Furamaki Sotaro ran. There were a lot of debris in the alley, and it was quite difficult to walk. But the old man Furamaki quickly ran forward as if he was used to it. If it was an ordinary person, he would definitely not be able to catch up with him. But Ryudo benefited from the physique of a professional. He still followed closely behind in this complicated environment. Sotaro ran, Ryudo chased. Sotaro continued to run, Ryudo continued to chase. The two of them, one running, one chasing, one running, inexplicably lasted for a full half an hour. That brat. Who is that brat? Why do you keep chasing after me and not letting me go? After running for half an hour, from Ginza Mokom to Ginza Ikaidacom, and then back to Ginza Mokom, the old man who was chased for more than a dozen streets finally couldn't take it anymore. Huff, huff, huff. Stop, stop. Suddenly, Furamaki Sotaro panted as he came to an open space next to a small alley. He stretched out his hand and made a stop gesture to Ryudo behind him. You finally stopped running? When the chase finally came to an end, although Long Do was also panting heavily, he was naturally much better off than a certain 69-year-old comrade. If you don't chase me, I won't run. If you don't run, why would I chase you? Is it because I've been rubbing against a girl's butt? This, after being rebuked by Ryudo, Furamaki frowned and could only take a deep breath. After taking a deep breath, the old man also returned to his usual master demeanor. He raised his chin and asked in a casual tone, "Young man, why are you looking for me?" Ryudo smiled and replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, "I want to be your disciple." Disciple? I see. But why do I have to teach you? My father is Kirishima Kazuma. He asked me to come to you. There was a hint of pride in Long Do's voice when he said this. In his opinion, since Sotaro was his father's master, then the two of them should have some master and disciple relationship. He should not hesitate to accept him as a disciple. Who knew that Furamaki Sotaro's face changed when he heard the name and said in an angry tone, "It's him. That bastard asked you to come here. You're that bastard's son?" Different from before, Furamaki Sotaro's tone was obviously angry, which made Ryudo feel that something was wrong. That's not right. Logically speaking, aren't they master and disciple? Why would Furamaki Kazuma? I'll never forget that day. Just when Ryudo was puzzled and trying to figure out the relationship between the two, Furamaki Sotaro gritted his teeth and said seriously, He dared to steal my title of master of the dance floor in the nightclub. He beat me in dancing. I'm not worthy of being his disciple. What? Before he finished speaking, Ryudo's expression became very interesting, and the image of the Rulon group in his mind was subtly distorted. Chapter 69. In Ryudo's heart. What was the image of the biological father and Rulon Group's leader, Kiryu Kazuma? First of all, he was an indomitable man. Whether it was his appearance, aura, or behavior, they all showed the word hardcore. People could not help but admire him. However, Furamaki Sotaro said that the disciple beat him in dancing, and also took away his title of master of the dance floor in the nightclub. From this short sentence, there were actually a few very important information that could be extracted. First, Kiryu Kazuma went to nightclubs. Second, Kiryu Kazuma's disco dancing skills were very good. Third, Furamaki Sotaro was a stingy person. As if he saw Ryudo's expression of disbelief, Furamaki said indignantly, "What? You don't believe it?" "It's not that I don't believe it. It's just that it feels a little different from the old man I know. He only stopped after he got married and had a child. Before, he was completely serious on the surface, but the degree of inwardly flirtatious was not much worse than me. It seems like you still have some understanding of your inwardly flirtatious nature. How rare." Just like this, the old and the young found a place to sit down. Ryudo also listened to Furamaki talk about Kiryu Kazuma's past. According to the old man, Kazuma was not only the master of the dance floor, he played a lot of things. Not completely counting, Kazuma used to be a frequent customer of Kamishitachi's pub, massage parlor, bath parlor, PR club, casino, disco, KTV, performance hall, and other places. At the same time, he was also a master of baseball, golf, claw machine, arcade, boise, mahjong, shogi, darts, table tennis, bowling, billiards, and other small entertainment games. That guy's favorite songs were Kamishitachi Snow Moon Flower, Machine Kiss, Me 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 Me. And he especially liked to sing with the girls in the nightclub. He was so shameless. Speaking of this, Furamaki Sotaro showed a look of disdain. Because every time he went to the nightclub with Kazuma, the girls ignored him and squeezed to Kazuma's side. So that's how it is. That old-fashioned old man actually had such a wonderful past. After hearing so many stories about his biological father, Ryudo felt like crying and laughing. He originally thought that Kazuma was a decent person, who knew that he became decent after getting married and having children. He used to be this kind of a slut. However, since Yima grew up on the streets, and his adoptive father was a member of Extreme Path, it was only natural that he would be influenced by these things from a young age. What's more, after he got married, he decisively chose to live in seclusion and no longer wandered around. So Ryudo had no reason to blame him, as long as he didn't have a bunch of illegitimate children outside. After talking about the past, the old man couldn't help but sigh and said, "Speaking of which, that was a matter of 10 or 20 years ago. Time really flies." Since Kazuma founded the Rulon Group, he rarely contacted Sotaro. The two master and disciple could be said to have become strangers. But Sotaro didn't blame him, because Sotaro knew that this was because Kazuma didn't want him to be involved in the grudges of Kamishitachi, so he took the initiative to distance himself. At this time, Ryudo also smiled and complimented, "Isn't that so? But seeing that you can still be energetic after being chased by me for more than 10 streets, old man will definitely be happy. Don't flatter me. Anyway, it must be that Kazuma has too many enemies outside, and he's afraid that you will be in trouble outside. So he thought of this old man. More or less. Anyway, there are indeed tens of thousands of people who want to kill me now. Can you teach me a few moves?" "You're exaggerating. In fact, it's not impossible to teach you, but it depends on whether you're cut out for it." Suddenly, Furamaki Sotaro stepped back a little and carefully looked at Ryudo from top to bottom. After all, the reason why Tong Shunyima was chosen by him to teach him the ancient Mu-style martial arts was mainly because of his extraordinary talent. If he was born in the Warring States period, Kazuma would definitely become a famous samurai. This was Sotaro's evaluation at that time. In fact, this was indeed the case. When Kazuma learned the Furamaki-style martial arts, he once swept the largest underground fighting arena in Kamishitachi, the Sai River Underground Fighting Arena, and created the legend of undefeated in 100 battles. When he met with Kazuma yesterday, Ryudo saw the attribute value and confirmed this point. After all, the physical attribute of the leader actually reached the LV4 physique, international warrior level. Exaggerated physical attributes and rich combat experience, coupled with the Furamaki-style paleo martial arts system. It was no wonder that Kazuma could make a name for himself in Kamishitachi. Even if there were 70 or 80 punks, they wouldn't be enough to beat him. After feeling Sotaro's doubts, Ryudo also straightened his back and said confidently, "I just chased you for more than a dozen streets. Do you think my physical attributes are not good enough?" With Ryudo's current LV3 physique, professional master level physical ability, not to mention other things, in this age group, it was definitely a monster level. After all, how many minors had the physical attributes of a professional player? But Sotaro shook his head and said, "There's nothing to say about physical attributes, but learning the Furamaki-style martial arts doesn't rely on strength, but on comprehension. Of course I know this, but my brain is still. Forget it, it's just average. It's useless to say more. In short, first punch me and see." After saying that, Sotaro stood up and walked to the side of the open space. "Me? Punch you?" Although Ryudo also followed, he was a bit surprised by this request. The Furamaki-style martial arts is a martial arts of self-defense. It is not proud of taking the initiative to attack. The strongest three profound skills of the style are all counterattacking skills. At this time, Sotaro put on the demeanor of a master and slowly said with his hands behind his back, "Martial arts of self-defense. Focused on running? This is my escape route." Something like that. Although he felt that the Furamaki-style martial arts had dropped to the extreme, Ryudo still obediently put on a posture and punched towards Sotaro, who happened to be in attack range. This punch didn't have any skill to speak of, but the speed and strength were very good. It reflected Ryudo's fighting principle of random punches can kill the master. But just as he punched out, the moment when he didn't hit the opponent, the short body in front of him suddenly flashed. Then Ryudo's fist stopped in midair. This. In that instant, Ryudo felt as if he was hit by a body-freezing technique. His whole body was stiff to the point that he couldn't move, and his breathing also suddenly stopped. This kind of complete stagnation lasted for more than a second. "How is it? Can't move, right?" Seeing that Ryudo finally knelt down with his hands on his stomach, Sotaro on the side smiled and said, This is the profound skill of the Furamaki-style martial arts of the three profound skills. Its name is Tiger Fall." After not using this move for a long time, Sotaro's aura became completely different from before. He looked like a sect master. Chapter 70. Although the Furamaki sect was known for its martial arts of self-defense, and did not specialize in active offensive moves, the power of this counterattack was terrifying enough. When Ryudo was hit by Furamaki Sotaro's ultimate skill, Tiger Fall, he felt his upper abdomen tighten. After a short pause, a sharp pain came from his abdomen, almost causing him to faint on the spot. In terms of physical strength, Sotaro, who was now close to 70 years old, clearly did not have the strength to beat Ryudo to such an extent with a single punch. The reason for such severe injuries and sudden stagnation was mainly due to the location and timing of the attack. According to Sotaro's words, this move could only hit one location, and that was the diaphragm in the middle of the human body. The diaphragm was the separation between the chest and the abdomen. Its purpose was to help the lungs breathe, helping the lungs to exhale and inhale air through contraction and expansion. The essence of ultimate skill, Tiger Fall, was a standard straight punch with a short distance and small movement. At the instant the enemy attacked, the abdomen would be hit first with the abdomen. If the location, angle, and strength were all suitable, the diaphragm that was hit would produce a transient spasm phenomenon, causing breathing to stop for an instant. The body would also become extremely stiff, and the enemy would be at their mercy. At the same time, because it was targeted at the moment the enemy attacked, the enemy would definitely charge forward when they attacked. It would feel like the enemy's upper abdomen was slammed into the fist, greatly increasing the power of the attack. Humans are creatures that have the least awareness of defense when they take the initiative to attack. Tiger Fall is to seize the moment of the opponent's attack to stop the attack and directly intercept the opponent's attack. This way, we can achieve the goal of stopping the battle. Seeing Ryudo half kneeling on the ground, looking like he was in unbearable pain, Sotaro raised his head slightly and put on a harmonious posture of "I'm good by nature." After slowly standing up, Ryudo asked while panting, "Then what if the enemy doesn't stop attacking?" Then continue to hit him with Tiger Fall. Won't it stop after a few more hits? Isn't it a bad idea to continuously use such a vicious counterattack technique on others? Don't worry, this part of the body won't kill anyone. I've only used Tiger Fall 17 times on one person. Other than fainting a few times from the pain, he's fine. What a sect of martial arts of war. How kind. Ahem. Anyway, I've already taught you the basic principles behind profound meaning of skill, Tiger Fall. Now go back and train on your own. Goodbye. Just as Ryudo was sighing about how weird the Furamaki sect was, Sotaro coughed slightly, indicating that his work was over. What? Wait a minute? That's it. Instantly, Ryudo asked in surprise. So the lesson is over after a punch and a few words? What else? Your father learned it the same way back then. That's why I said that the cultivation of the Furamaki sect requires comprehension. After staring at Ryudo with a strange gaze, Sotaro turned around and said, "After a week, if you've learned Tiger Fall, come find me here. I'll teach you other profound meanings. If you can't learn them, then don't come. That means you're not cut out for this." Before he finished speaking, Furamaki Sotaro's skinny body had already disappeared into the alley like a gust of wind, leaving behind a stupefied Ryudo standing in the same spot. The cold wind blew, and the night in the small alley seemed so gloomy, just like Longdo's mood at this moment. When Longdo finally returned to the entrance of the disco, he met up with Minghai, who had been waiting by the car for a long time. Minghai was also shocked by his strange expression. "Second-generation leader? What's wrong with you? Why do you look like you've been?" "Strangely? Nothing, let's go back first. I'm a bit tired." "What happened? Could it be that he didn't manage to catch that old man? Or did something happen?" When Ryudo got into the car, and the car slowly drove towards the headquarters of the Rulon group, Narukai was still secretly observing his master's condition, afraid that something bad had happened to him. In fact, Ryudo didn't have any accidents, but he felt that his headache had increased. 1 week. To learn the Furamaki sect profound meaning, Tiger Fall in 1 week. This was an almost impossible task in Ryudo's eyes. Although that punch didn't look complicated, it was still a high-level technique known as the profound meaning. To truly master it to the point where it could be used in actual combat was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It wasn't strange that Itsuma could do this. He was a natural-born martial artist, someone who was truly skilled in martial arts. However, Ryudo wasn't. He knew himself best. To put it bluntly, Ryudo was actually an ordinary person who didn't have a system and was only hot-blooded. As an ordinary person, it was naturally impossible for him to have the qualities of a main character in a wuxia novel who could easily learn any kind of martial arts. He also wouldn't be able to learn things so quickly. That's right. There shouldn't be any items in the system that can help me practice martial arts, right? There shouldn't be, right? With a self-deprecating attitude, Ryudo casually opened the system that he was gradually becoming familiar with. However, the moment he opened his personal page, he suddenly discovered that there seemed to be an additional column of data that wasn't there before. Now his personal attribute panel was like this: name Ryudo Kiryoichi, 16 attributes, Wisdom LV1, Physique LV3, Courage LV2, Insight LV1, Charm LV3, Title, Desperado, obtained after dying 3 times. After equipping, resurrection cost reduced by 20%, equipment, Black Star Pistol, normal, Taser, normal, Dagger, normal tools, Hooligan Velcro, Hooligan Analysis Mirror Skills, Furamaki-style martial arts total assets, 6,446,000 yuan. The other attributes were nothing special, but in the panel, there was an additional category of skills. And in the category of skills, there were actually the words Furamaki-style martial arts. It can't be. Does this count as me learning a skill? This, after using his slightly excited finger to open Furamaki-style martial arts. A secondary page appeared in front of Ryudo's eyes. Furamaki-style martial arts, skill column. Profoundness of skills, Tiger Fall. Proficiency 1%. Through this secondary page, Ryudo could not only see the types of skills that he had mastered, but the most important thing was that he could actually see the proficiency of the skills. It was really a pretty good support function. Although when he saw the 1% proficiency, Ryudo still curled his lips and felt a little annoyed. However, compared to this, what made him feel even more surprised was the new items in the Krypton Gold market. The new items related to skills. Chapter 71. Long Do had always had a love-hate relationship with this Krypton shopping mall that didn't have a nice name, but was very practical. He loves it because there are always a lot of very useful items in it, and he hates it because these things are too expensive. He can't afford many of them at all. He can only look at them and drool. However, at this moment, the Krypton shopping mall, which originally only had an item classification column, suddenly had a second classification. It actually had the words skill classification written on it. Skill classification. That is to say, he can buy things related to skills in it? Ryudo excitedly opened the skill classification column, and then he saw a lot of various skill books. Skill book. After purchasing, you can learn the skill. Repeated purchases can increase skill proficiency. After casually opening a skill book, named Sao's Postpartum Care, Ryudo looked at the description below, and suddenly nodded. What the hell is this skill? The description of the skill book was very simple and easy to understand. You can learn this skill after buying the first book, and continuing to buy the same type of skill book can quickly increase proficiency. It's just that the number and types of skill books in this skill classification column are really too many. At a glance, there was a dazzling array of skills, making one feel as if they had come to a museum of human skills. What are the ordinary skills? Ancient Bajikwan, Ancient Siamese Muay Thai, Ancient Ryukyu Tang Hand, Rapid Gun Shooting, Lock Picking, Silent Movement, etc. What were the arts and arts skills? Rogues Don't Die by Bare Hands, Weapon Master, Essence of Forthright Throwing, Parkour Master, Iron Bone Mastery, Bronze Skin Mastery, etc. What were the stupid skills? Guide to Soap in Prison, Soul Singer's Roar, Lands How Ramen Beef Thinly Sliced Method, One-Hit Kill Against Aliens, Golden Retriever's Hair Care, etc. What the hell? These skills were too creative. How in the world did they come up with them? After carefully reading the description of these skills, the dragon head really felt like he was watching a funny program. For example, the one-hit killing technique specifically for extraterrestrials was priced at $1 trillion. After learning it, one could kill any extraterrestrials that had descended to Earth with one hit. If this world were to be invaded by aliens in the future, Ryudo might be able to use this ability to save the world. The problem was that there were no aliens. After choosing for a while, Ryudo realized that there were some skills that were more realistic. Of course, their prices were also more realistic. For example, the Hooligan Does Not Die by Bare Hands, which was sold for 3 million yuan, was a super practical skill that could turn anything in one's hand into a fighting tool when one did not have a weapon. From small stones on the side of the road to large tables and chairs, pots and pans, everything that could be used as a weapon. After mastering it, it could be said that this was the pinnacle of environmental warfare. There was also mastery of iron bones and mastery of copper skin. Although they were sold for 1 million each, they could greatly increase one's resistance. Other than these passive skills, the various active skills of the martial arts were also quite attractive. For example, Ancient Siamese Muay Thai. This fist technique was originally used to kill people on the battlefield. After slowly improving and reducing its lethality, it became the current fighting technique. In theory, the original version had long been lost. Similarly, there were Ancient Ryukyu Tang Hand, Ancient Bajikwan and so on. Many of the martial arts here were the original forms that had long been lost. In terms of lethality, they were several levels stronger than the ones that were passed down. Because the Furamaki-style martial arts that he had just learned did not seem to have any active offensive moves, Ryudo also needed to choose a strong offensive martial art to supplement this. But at the same time, he also needed to buy some passive skills to strengthen his basic abilities. In short, there were many things that he wanted to buy, but he was so poor that he could not be at ease and buy boldly. Phew. In the end, he still needed to earn money. After taking the car back to the Rulon Group headquarters, Ryudo laid on the bed and looked at the ceiling. His heart was filled with all kinds of money symbols floating around. After the last revival, Ryudo's little treasury was only left with about 6 million. This amount of money was not too little, and could also be used to buy some good things from the market. But Ryudo did not dare to spend it carelessly. After all, his money was closely related to his life. If it was not for the fact that he had no other choice, he would not dare to spend the money to the limit. Otherwise, if he died, then wouldn't it be completely over? In short, tomorrow he should go to school first. He had to find Gao Yuan and pull him into his group to see if there was any way to earn a lot of money in a short period of time. Although Ryudo knew that most of the ways to earn money were written in the criminal law, he still hoped that Gao Yuan, the business genius, could help him. Right. It seemed that other than Gao Yuan who could help him in this area, there were also the two young ladies, right? At this moment, the figures of two beautiful women suddenly appeared in Ryudo's mind. Kanzaki-colored glaze and Sakudari Yunyen. These two young ladies had a certain level of friendship with Ryudo, and they were both of noble status. Why not ask them about earning money? If this was 2 days ago, Ryudo would have said something like, "A real man does not live off a woman," to put on an act. But now that he had unknowingly fallen into the abyss of spending money, his skin seemed to have become much thicker, and he no longer cared about living off a woman. Beep 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 beep. And so, 1 minute later, Kanzaki-colored glaze, who was sitting at her desk and writing calligraphy, received this message. "Young lady, I urgently need money right now. Do you have any way to help me? Dog's head. By Ryudo Kiryopft." What the hell was a dog's head? For a moment, colored glaze couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. The figure of the guy who had skipped class for the entire day appeared in her mind. If it weren't for the fact that she saw the dog's head at the end, colored glaze would have thought that he had gotten himself into some serious trouble. But now it seemed that it wasn't so serious. He was just being a talker. And so, colored glaze put down her writing brush, and her slender fingers swiftly flew over her cell phone's keyboard. Beep 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 beep. About 10 seconds later, colored glaze's reply came. "Go rob a bank. When the time comes, I'll write an anonymous letter to the nesting duck prison to encourage you and cheer for you from the shadows." What the hell? It's one thing to write a letter to me, but it's an anonymous letter? Even if you want to cheer for me, you should do it somewhere I can see you. Isn't this too much? Just as Ryudo was sighing at how heartless colored glaze was, Yunyen's reply came. Chapter 72. Compared to colored glaze, who was born in a corrupt bureaucratic family and had seen through the darkness of the world, Yunyen's attitude was much better. "My parents don't want me to be tainted with bad habits, so they've always been strict with money. I really can't help you in this area. I'm very sorry." Well said, that's what a person should say. Through this simple sentence, Ryudo seemed to see Yunyen's apologetic expression on the other side of the phone. As expected of Yunyen from Suki, she's beautiful, speaks well, and her attitude is so gentle. She's much better than a certain dark lady humph. After secretly mocking colored glaze, Ryudo felt that it wasn't enough, so he continued to send messages to mock her. "You're a lady and you're a lady. You're such a failure as a lady. What do you mean? Is he comparing me to someone? He knows other ladies." Humph. Colored glaze slightly pouted when she received this message, and her face showed obvious displeasure. So she continued to type mercilessly, trying to fight back across dimensions. But perhaps because colored glaze was too focused on texting, she didn't notice a familiar figure slowly approaching from behind. "Lady, who are you texting?" "Wah. After being shocked by the dancing costume that suddenly appeared behind her, Colored Glaze's finger slipped and accidentally typed a word. Then she hurriedly sent it out. Originally, Leoli was going to reply, "Then go and find the young mistress you like. Don't ask me." But the last few words changed from "don't ask me" to "don't kiss me." When Ryudo saw Colored Glaze's reply, he was dumbfounded. "Then go find the lady you like, don't kiss me?" This means that if I don't find another lady, I can kiss her? Is Colored Glaze this open-minded? No, I'm a gentleman. How can I be like this when we've only known each other for a few days? We have to start from holding hands, kiss after 3 days, and do it after 6 days. After taking a deep breath, Ryudo decided to clearly express his honest attitude to Colored Glaze, so that she wouldn't misunderstand that he was an indecent person who could offer his body at any time. Colored Glaze, on the other hand, didn't realize that there was a problem with the message she sent out, and was still arguing with Dancing Costume. Dancing Costume, just a greeting from a friend, nothing special. For some strange reason, Colored Glaze obviously didn't want Dancing Costume to know that she was communicating with Ryudo, so she put her phone behind her and made up a reasonable excuse. "Friend, do any of your friends know your phone number?" Dancing Costume immediately frowned. She knew that there were no more than 5 people who had the lady's phone number, and she knew all of them. After all, the lady's personal information was strictly controlled. It was impossible for ordinary people to know Colored Glaze's phone number, and Ryudo's phone number was secretly given to him by Colored Glaze. Suddenly, a drop of cold sweat fell from Colored Glaze's smooth forehead, and she quickly remedied. "It's a relative from the royal family. The girl you saw last time when you went back to your hometown. Do you still remember? The eldest daughter of the emperor? Princess Feudheim? Yes, that's her. But when you came back, didn't you say that the princess was unruly and uneducated, and her appearance and temperament were as bad as if she drank something strange when she grew up? So you didn't want to pay attention to her?" Puffed. After hearing Dancing Costume's merciless retelling, Colored Glaze almost spat out on the spot. On the surface, Dancing Costume was a samurai who protected and monitored Colored Glaze, but in reality, the two grew up together and were as close as sisters. So before Ryudo appeared, Colored Glaze would complain to Dancing Costume whenever she wanted to, and because she complained so much, she often forgot who she was complaining about. For a moment, Colored Glaze's expression became very awkward, and her little butt on the chair also twisted and turned, not knowing if there was something strange under her butt. Suspicious. From Dancing Costume's point of view, Colored Glaze's flustered expression and shifty eyes were very suspicious, as if she was doing something shameful. "Who are you talking to? Be honest and tell me, okay? I already said no. I was just beep 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 beep." Just as Colored Glaze was insisting that she was definitely not doing anything shameful, a new text message was sent to her phone. Again, Colored Glaze turned her head and secretly glanced at her phone, then saw that the sender was Ryudo Kiryu again. Dancing Dress hurriedly looked over and leaned over to ask, "You're here again. Seeing how secretive you are, could you be a man?" "How could it be? If it's a man, he'll be thrown into the Tokyo Bay tomorrow to feed the fish." After swearing an oath on Ryudo's cheap life of $1 million, Colored Glaze blocked Dancing Costume with one hand to prevent her from getting any closer, while her other hand opened the text message to see what this guy was up to. But because the situation was more or less rushed, Colored Glaze did not see the voice symbol next to the text message. That's right, the voice symbol was a voice message, the kind that would automatically read out loud once opened. Thus, the second after Colored Glaze opened the text message, Ryudo's righteous tone appeared in the room. "Milady, I think that our relationship should be developed step by step. So kissing is a bit too much. But if you really want it that badly, it's not impossible to give it to you tomorrow." Ryudo's voice floated in Milady's room, and clearly entered Colored Glaze's and Dancing Costume's ears. In an instant, the room fell into a deathly silence. Colored Glaze stared at her phone with wide eyes, while Dancing Costume stared at Colored Glaze with wide eyes, as if she had seen something unbelievably terrifying. Did I hear wrong? Why would that idiot Ryuto suddenly say something stupid like complete kiss? Want? The moment she reacted, Colored Glaze's pretty face turned red, but she quickly checked the text message on her phone. It would have been better if she didn't see it, but after reading it, Colored Glaze saw the "Don't kiss me" message she sent to Ryuto before. So that's why did I type it wrong and accidentally send it out, causing that guy to misunderstand? After understanding the root of everything, Colored Glaze first let out a sigh of relief, then couldn't help but shiver. Because even without turning around, she could feel Dancing Costume's frantic breath behind her. "Milady, that was Ryuto Kiryo's voice just now, right? What did you do? How far has it developed?" No. There's really nothing. I swear. You must have lied to Milady. Damn it. I'll bring people to tear him to pieces. Wait. Don't. That night, Colored Glaze's room was filled with chicken feathers and duck blood, giving her a splitting headache. By the time she finally explained everything to Dancing Costume, it was already late at night. This caused Colored Glaze to come to school the next day with dark circles under her eyes. It was so infuriating. Chapter 73. When Miss Kanzaki Colored Glaze came to school early in the morning with dark circles under her eyes and an unhappy expression, it was destined that this would not be an ordinary day. A storm that could engulf all of Tokyo was brewing. And the cause of this storm was the young master, Ryuto Kiryo, who had been waiting at the entrance of Dori Daiichi High School early in the morning. Most of the classes at Dori Daiichi High School were arranged in the morning, and because there were club activities in the afternoon, the students' time was also very scattered. So usually, the time of school in the morning was the time of the day when there was the most traffic. But early in the morning, a strange scene appeared at the school's entrance. The young master Ryuto, who had skipped class yesterday, was actually leaning against the entrance of Dori Daiichi High School, under the astonished gazes of countless people. From time to time, he would look around, as if he was waiting for someone. Waiting for someone? It can't be right. Could it be that he was waiting at the entrance to take someone's life? If it was a normal student, waiting for a friend at the school's entrance was actually quite normal. But if it was Ryuto who was waiting for someone, then it was easy for people to think of some scenes that were not suitable for children. So early in the morning, just who was Ryuto waiting for? Of course, it was Colored Glaze Kanzaki, who had her heart broken by him last night. Who else could it be? Ever since Ryuto sent that voice message last night, he had been waiting for a long time, but he did not receive a reply from Colored Glaze. Wait a minute. Did I speak too directly and hurt her heart? At this time, Ryuto finally started to panic, so he kept texting and calling Colored Glaze, but there was no response. With no other choice, Ryuto could only go to the school's entrance early in the morning to wait for Kanzaki, and try to explain to her that he had just spoken without thinking, and had no other intentions. She's coming. Not long after, when he saw two beautiful figures walking towards him from the crowd, Ryuto immediately became alert, and tried his best to keep a low profile as he walked towards them. Early in the morning, when Colored Glaze stepped out of her low-profile black car, all the students around her could feel an unprecedented low pressure. Normally, although Colored Glaze Kanzaki was not as approachable as Yunyen Suki, she would not come to school with a sour expression. But today's Colored Glaze Kanzaki was obviously not in a good mood, and the dark circles under her eyes were very obvious. When she slowly walked towards the school's entrance, Kanzaki's dancing, who got out of the car with her, and said, Kanzaki, why don't you consider putting some makeup on? I never put on makeup. It's not like you don't know that. Who do you think gave it to? It's all thanks to you, okay? Colored Glaze Kanzaki pointed at the large dark circles under her left eye and curled her lips at Kanzaki's dancing costume. If it wasn't for Kanzaki's dancing costume going crazy and wanting to kill someone last night, and Colored Glaze using all sorts of methods to explain herself, she wouldn't have gone to bed so late last night. However, when Colored Glaze and dancing costume arrived at the entrance where there was the most traffic, her dim eyes suddenly caught sight of a low-profile figure walking towards them. That guy had his head down and his waist bent like a cat, as if he didn't want to attract attention. But unfortunately, the surrounding students who were running away, as if they had seen a ghost, had already exposed the identity of this Voldemort. Isn't that guy Ryudo? Humph. When she saw Longzhou walking towards her, Colored Glaze first snorted coldly, then as if she had thought of something, her cheeks slightly flushed. Although last night's misunderstanding was caused by her hand slipping, but when she carefully thought about it, Colored Glaze couldn't help but roll around on the bed. The butterflies in her stomach were running wild. After all, words like kiss, complete, and want were too stimulating for Colored Glaze. Since she was raised as a vegetarian king from a young age, her understanding of the relationship between men and women was strictly controlled by her family. But from the descriptions in some books, Colored Glaze could imagine how hot it would feel if intimate contact between men and women happened between her and the person she liked. Of course, even so, it didn't mean that Colored Glaze was willing to do those things with Ryudo. Especially after hearing Ryudo's reply last night, Colored Glaze was still a bit angry. What in the voice chat? He made it sound like I was a horny slut. That's too much. Therefore, when she saw Ryudo walk towards her, as if he had something to say to her, Colored Glaze's first reaction was to act haughty and leave. She would wait for Ryudo to catch up, and then listen to him slowly apologize. If I'm still angry. If you don't apologize to me for 5 minutes, I won't talk to you. As if she was deliberately throwing a tantrum, Colored Glaze quickly pulled the dancing costume in another direction, as if she wanted to purposely go around Ryudo. Although this action was tens of meters away, Ryudo obviously noticed it. Wait. Don't. Hence, he immediately raised his hand and tried to stop Luli from running. At the very least, it wouldn't be too late for her to run after listening to his explanation. But just as Ryudo was about to approach and Colored Glaze was about to pretend to run away, another tall and curvy figure came over and inserted herself between the two. Oh, isn't this Ryudo classmate? Good morning. It was different from Colored Glaze's crisp voice that carried a trace of majesty and valiance, as if it was a unique voice that made people feel like they were in a forest. Suddenly, the voice that came from Ryudo's side sounded much softer, more mellow and smooth, and it also brought out the beauty of a woman's voice to the extreme. Ryudo heard this voice the day before yesterday, and it just so happened that the owner of this voice was one of the few girls in school who would take the initiative to greet him. So he turned his head to look, and saw Yunyan's beautiful figure slowly walking towards him, with a smile as bright as the morning sun on her face. Yunyan, good morning. After seeing Yunyan, Ryudo immediately stopped and waved at the beautiful senior with a smile. Most people in school thought that Ryudo was a mad dog, so they didn't even dare to approach him. But after the incident the day before yesterday, Yunyan knew that he wasn't that kind of person, but a promising young man with noble morals. Why did she say that? Because he was willing to help Yunyan with her writing, so he must be a promising young man. When she came to Ryudo's side, Yunyan asked in a concerned tone, "Oh right, you didn't come to school yesterday. Did something special happen?" Something did happen, but let's talk about it as we walk. Just after Yunyan came over, Ryudo could feel at least a few hundred eyes looking at them, which made him feel a bit awkward. So, early in the morning, Yunyan and Ryudo Kiryu walked side by side in the direction of the school gate, under the watchful eyes of everyone. When the surrounding crowd saw this scene, they suddenly became excited. Colored Glaze, who originally wanted to throw a tantrum and act high and mighty, and wait for Ryudo to apologize, had her brain freeze on the spot. Chapter 74. Why did this guy Ryudo hook up with Yunyan so quickly? And from the looks of it, they seemed to be very familiar with each other. Just 2 days ago, Colored Glaze did indeed hear that Ryudo was going to contact Yunyan, but she didn't think that he would act so quickly, and that their relationship would develop so quickly. Originally, with the severity of Colored Glaze's situation, it would be very difficult for Ryudo to hook up with Miss Tsukiji. After all, not every miss had the heart of a bodhisattva and magnanimous like her, to be able to tolerate that idiot steal like straight man's mental state. But what people didn't expect was This early in the morning? What the hell did Colored Glaze see? Under Luli's gaze that was as if she had seen a ghost, Long Do and Yun Yin walked into the campus side by side. Moreover, the two of them were talking and laughing, looking very happy. At this moment Colored Glaze, who was just throwing a tantrum at Ryudo, felt very embarrassed. It was as if the person she was throwing a tantrum at had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and was snatched away halfway. Miss! Wait, my head hurts, let me rest. Just as Colored Glaze was holding her forehead and closing her eyes to rest, this strange storm quickly blew from outside the school gate to inside the school gate. If the situation of Ryudo waiting at the gate was enough to attract attention, then him and Yunyin walking into the school side by side, and even talking and laughing, this scene could only be described as a fatty and little boy holding hands again. It was well known that although Yunyin was a very easy person to get along with, she had always maintained a polite distance with boys. The proof was that until now, no one had ever seen Yunyin alone with a boy. Moreover, this kind of situation where the two of them were talking and laughing at the same time going to school early in the morning was actually a somewhat immature and romantic act. Even if they weren't a couple, it would only happen between a boy and a girl who had feelings for each other. Could it be? It can't be. Yunyin and Ryudo Kiryu? This was simply super big news. Of course, the current relationship between Yunyin and Ryudo wasn't that kind of relationship. At most they were the relationship between a lousy author and an unlucky editor. But the feeling of them talking and laughing along the way really made it easy for people to think the wrong way. The worst thing was that it wasn't one or two people who thought the wrong way, but the whole school together. Not long after, as usual, this morning's classes started as usual. But whether it was in the first, second grade, or third grade classes, a new pace, a storm was still rapidly brewing quickly. Many years ago, the computer brain of Dory First Senior High School had set up a forum called First Senior High BBS to share some interesting things and gossip in the school. Most of the time, most of the students didn't have a habit, so most students didn't have a habit with the habit. However, there was a huge change in the situation today. Any student, as long as they quietly opened the First High BBS with their mobile phone under the cover of a book, they would definitely see the crazy posts like a virus. Because of the big event that happened this morning, most of the posts naturally revolved around the two central figures. One of them was the third-year school belle, who was loved by everyone. She was the cloud goose in the moonlight. The other was the second-year school bully, Tongsheng Ryudu, who was feared by everyone and was the reincarnated ghost of a ghost. If someone said that these two names would be together before today, that person would definitely think that there was something wrong with their brain. But now it was different. The situation had changed rapidly. It was like the Earth was invaded by aliens. Even on the First High BBS, the most popular voting post was, "What do you think the relationship between Yunyin and that person is?" After a morning, the voting results of this post were as follows. The votes for absolutely no relationship were 726 votes. The votes for anyway, let's call the police first were 921 votes. The votes for Ryudo Kiryu should die were 869, 672, 6592, 271 votes. How to describe it? Who knew where this school got so many people? It was simply a universal public outrage. The wave that this incident set off was something that even Ryudo and Yunyin didn't expect. For the whole day, almost all the students from the first grade to the third grade didn't want to go to class. They constantly used all kinds of reasoning and discussion, beating around the bush, and making up nonsense to try to uncover the truth of the matter, while at the same time cursing someone to get hit by a truck and go to another world. This kind of noisy and restless atmosphere made Masato Takayama, who was sitting in the first-year F class, feel very unhappy. In this first high school that focused on the academic atmosphere, the students' academic performance had a very clear correlation with their class. Each grade was divided into 6 classes from A to F. The best students were concentrated in a class, and the worst students would naturally fall into F class. As for how Ryudo that guy got into B class, It was obviously because he worked very hard during the exam. He tried his best to threaten the unlucky guy next to him to help him finish the exam, so that he wouldn't fall into F class, which was full of trash. From the point of view that even Ryudo didn't want to go to F class students were more or less discriminated against in school. As a result, they worked especially hard after entering F class, striving to get a chance to be promoted in the next exam. Of course, this so-called promotion desire had nothing to do with Masato Takayama. He felt that F class was pretty good, and it was quiet in this place. In the eyes of ordinary students, Masato Takayama was an unremarkable guy. He was thin, had a melancholy temperament, and his messy hair almost covered his eyes. He was usually alone, giving people a serious feeling of being unsociable. In most classes, there would be one or two such students, and not many people would pay attention to them. But Masato Takayama wasn't an ordinary student. In fact, his degree of excellence was far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. Ring, 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 ring. After a chaotic day, the bell that signified the end of school rang throughout the campus. Gao Yuan carried his school bag and walked out of the school with familiarity. For Masato Takayama, he had to deal with the business affairs of several companies, so he didn't have time to waste in school. But what he didn't expect was that when he left the school building, two strange people hiding in the dark had already locked onto this elite ghost figure, like a big cat that saw a mouse. Chapter 75. At this moment, the two people who were secretly watching Gao Yuan were naturally Long Do and Ming Ji. After looking at the face that he was tired of looking at for 2 days, Sensible couldn't help but sigh. Masato Gao Yuan. From the surface, he doesn't look like such a vicious guy. From the surface, you don't look like such a capable guy. Don't judge a book by its cover, brother. Unlike Sensible, when Ryudo looked at Gao Yuan, his gaze was like looking at a hen that could lay golden eggs. In fact, Masato Gao Yuan was indeed a hen that could lay golden eggs. But from a certain point of view, this hen laid poisonous eggs. In these 2 days, Ryudo asked Sensible to investigate Gao Yuan and obtained a lot of information about him. Although Ryudo already knew what Gao Yuan was doing in the dark through the content of the game didn't explain in detail, so he still needed some details. And Sensible lived up to the name cyber detective. After Ryudo gave him the direction to investigate, he quickly investigated Gao Yuan. Masato Takahara, 15 years old male. His father was the executive director of the large gaming company Nintendo. He was the third child in the family. His 2 brothers' grades were excellent, and they both worked in the family company. Masato Gao Yuan, who grew up in this situation, wasn't very valued and didn't get along well with others. Whether it was in his family or in school, there weren't many people who would pay attention to him. Therefore, 3 years ago, Gao Yuan began to try to make a name for himself. And the direction he was trying to make a name for himself was to develop into a business consultant. And he shocked everyone with his skills. When he was 12 years old, Gao Yuan used his unique business sense, an unscrupulous business model, to help a company come back from the dead. From then on, he gained the name Business Ghost. Now he was a secret business consultant for 5 listed companies, the kind that only served the top managers. Although he had never shown his face, those operators were very convinced, because as long as they followed Gao Yuan's train of thought, they would be able to make a lot of money. However, although Gao Yuan was able to make the company's business situation quite good, as Sensible said, this guy's business methods could only be described as vicious. As the saying goes, the business world is like a battlefield, but this is just a metaphor. Many businessmen in the Tokyo circle still want some face, and they won't do things so ruthlessly. However, in Gao Yuan's hands, it was as literal as it could be. He treated the business war as a battlefield. He would do anything for the sake of victory. Examples for comparison are as follows. The traditional business strategy of Tokyo's business circle. By dissecting the weaknesses of human nature and specializing in the loopholes of the law, it could be used thousands of miles away to convert value into resources. using all kinds of black technology, spies, hackers, and other auxiliary plans to achieve results-oriented structural enterprises to pave the way. Gao Yuan's subordinate, Shang Zhan, arranging for takeout staff to put laxatives in competitors' water fountains, ordering a few burly men to rush into the office to snatch the official seal, bribing security guards to climb over the wall into competitors' factory to secretly take photos, and hiring hooligans to walk around their company every day, arranging for actors to cooperate with the TV station to fake the other party's door and add a hell filter, buying a water army to smear the other party to death, or simply putting a burlap bag over the head of the other party's senior management to beat them up at night. In summary, Gao Yuan's business war was a real business war. It was not the kind of high-end business war that people imagined. If you can use the hammer directly, you won't use your brain. If you use your brain, you don't have to be afraid of being locked up. In any case, as long as you can suppress the opponent and make money for yourself, you bastard. Under this kind of business model, that could be said to be extremely unethical, the boss of Gao Yuan's company was always one step away from going to jail. His butt would always be greased and waiting for the favor of the prisoner. But he himself didn't care about this. In any case, it was the boss who went to jail, not him. At worst, he could just change companies and continue. Was the boss's fortune telling? Once he earned this money, he would be ready to pick up soap at any time. Did he really think that money was so easy to earn? Of course, Gao Yuan didn't purely rely on all kinds of despicable methods to win the world. He was actually very good at all kinds of normal business methods that wandered the edge of the law. It was just that he preferred to use simple and convenient tactics. In fact, just the day before, Gao Yuan instructed one of his companies to hire another company called BlackBerry Conscience Finance to collect a debt by force. This Conscience Finance appeared to be an ordinary financial company on the surface, but in fact, it was a debt collection group formed by violent groups. This kind of debt collection group was on the border between legal and illegal. They would use some very uncomfortable methods to collect debts, but it was useless to call the police. Of course, in addition to collecting debts, they also did some other financial work, such as phone calls, online fraud, and counterfeiting. In this era, this kind of financial company that was on the border between legal and illegal was very common. It was also a half-legal industry that changed from extreme to semi-legal. Of course, to put it bluntly, it was a group of trash that relied on bullying honest people to make money. However, what could be used should be used. Even if it was trash, it could be used to great effect in Gao Yuan's hands. The most important thing was that he always hid behind the phone. No matter what he ordered the company to do, no one could find him. Takahara Masato, the person who hired Conscience Finance to collect debts, was you, right? Just as Gao Yuan left the school gate and came to a more remote corner, a powerful hand wrapped around him like a ghost. In an instant, Gao Yuan was completely stunned. How is this possible? Someone knows that I was the one who arranged yesterday's incident. In the next second, Gao Yuan turned his head stiffly. When he saw the ferocious face with dyed yellow hair, his body suddenly trembled violently. It was Ryudo Kiryu, the famous second generation in Dori First High. Gao Yuan naturally had a certain understanding of Ryudo and the Rulong group. But the most important thing was that Long Do had actually exposed his biggest secret in an instant. This made Gao Yuan feel a chill in his heart. He immediately took a deep breath and said with a bitter smile, I don't know what you're talking about. Yesterday, the company that you sent people to violently collect debts from is under the protection of the Dragon Group. In other words, the person that you and your company offended is me. Do you understand what will happen to you, friend? When he put his arm around Gao Yuan's shoulder like a close friend, Ryudo showed a gentle smile on his face. But in Gao Yuan's eyes, this smile was more terrifying than the devil from the 18 levels of hell. Chapter 76. No, it can't be. The company that I sent people to violently collect debts is under the protection of the Rulong Group? Why don't I know this information at all? Wait. The most important thing is, how did they know my identity? How did I get exposed? Suddenly, Gao Yuan's legs couldn't help but tremble. He knew that the underground world was very particular about face. If his organization was messed with by other organizations, then he must do something to save his face. The worst thing was that Gao Yuan's true identity was known by the extreme elements. Wouldn't that be the end of him? From Gao Yuan's point of view, he absolutely couldn't allow his identity to be made public. After all, his parents and brothers were senior executives of legal-listed companies, the famous Ninetio managers. If the public knew that Gao Yuan's family had such an unscrupulous business ghost who often crossed the legal line, it would definitely cause a serious blow to his family. In the area of Yodo, people cared more about their face than their family background. Their heads could be broken, blood could flow, but their hairstyle couldn't be messed up. If this kind of scandal were to be exposed, Gao Yuan's family would lose all face. A collective bow and an apology would not be enough. At the very least, they would have to add traditional etiquette such as a tearful performance and kowtow and kneel. At that time, Gao Yuan, who had embarrassed his family, would be expelled from the family and homeless on the streets. Even if Rulong Group continued to retaliate against him, it would not be impossible for him to die on the streets. Thinking of that scene, Gao Yuan's face was covered in a few drops of cold sweat. At the same time, he said with a trembling voice, "How much? How much do you want?" After being a business consultant for so many years, Gao Yuan naturally had a lot of money in his hands. If he could use money to bribe Ryudo, then this matter could be considered to be resolved satisfactorily. However, Ryudo shook his head and replied with a smile, "Although money is a good thing, I don't think this alone is enough to show your sincerity." Sincerity? Don't tell me. He wants me to in an instant. Gao Yuan couldn't help but think of the extremely terrifying punishments he had seen in manga. As he thought about it, his legs turned to jelly. He almost lost control of his bladder and was about to pee. No matter what, Gao Yuan was only a 15-year-old boy. Although he was a big shot in the business world, he was just a coward. In fact, according to the feedback from Ryudo's rogue analysis mirror, this guy's courage was only at the level of LVL1 mortal scraps. This was also the reason why he only dared to do business remotely through the phone, because he didn't dare to stand in the open. It was about time for him to atone for his sins with merit. Seeing that Gao Yuan looked like he was about to piss his pants, Ryudo's lips curled into a strange smile. He smiled and said, "Gao Yuan Masato, your business acumen and style of doing things are very good. Are you interested in working for me?" What? Follow him? When he heard this sudden invitation, Gao Yuan was startled at first, but then he heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he thought he was going to be thrown into the Tokyo Bay to feed the fish. So he just wanted to poach him? Gao Yuan had a deep understanding of his own ability and value. He naturally knew what Ryudo's poaching meant. In this materialistic world, even the Rulong Group needed money, and Takahara Masato was the person who could bring monetary returns to all organizations. Therefore, under Ryudo's deceit and intimidation, Gao Yuan soon appeared in the corner of a coffee shop. In the half-private room in the corner of the coffee shop, there were 3 young people sitting at this time. 3 young people wearing Dory First High School uniforms. First year Takahara Masato, second year Ryudo Kiryu, third year Sensible Goro. On the surface, this scene looked like 3 ordinary friends sitting together and chatting, but in fact, the identity of these 3 people was far from ordinary. Their father was a senior executive of a listed company, and he controlled 5 large enterprises. He had a keen business sense and a habit of doing business by any means necessary. Their father was the Tokyo police chief, and he secretly acted as a network detective. He had superhuman insight and a full understanding of the law, cyber detective. Their father was the leader of a large group. On the surface, he was playing a love game, but in fact, he was playing an action-adventure game to raise the extreme dragon. From a certain point of view, the family background and experience of the 3 were somewhat similar. They all had a prominent family background, but they wanted to make their own business. The most important thing was that they were the kind of people who didn't hesitate to cross the boundary of the law and wander in the dark. Therefore, Ryudo gave his group a name, Black 3 Stars. In the corner of the coffee shop, Ryudo also drank milk while telling Gao Yuan some things about the Heavenly Eye group. At the same time, he clearly told him that he wanted to use his power to start a war with this group. I see. Heavenly Eye group. So there is such a terrifying company in the world. Regarding the Heavenly Eye group and Heavenly Eye I am, even a business veteran like Gao Yuan had a hard time finding out. At this time, he couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Therefore, Ryudo struck while the iron was hot and asked, "So, have you decided to do it with us? You didn't plan to let me go anyway. What's the point of asking such a question? Ha ha ha. It's not a question of whether I plan to let you go or not. It's just that it's too wasteful for a talent like you to just control a few small enterprises behind the scenes." Long Do giggled as he tried to play dumb. At the same time, he discreetly gave Gao Yuan a compliment. In fact, Gao Yuan didn't have a choice now. After all, his background had been dug out. What else could he do if he didn't join? Wait to wander the streets. What's more, Gao Yuan was indeed very interested in the Heavenly Eye group, just like Sensible before. After all, no matter what, Gao Yuan and Sensible were only teenagers. The atmosphere of fighting against an evil company that is harming the world behind the scenes was quite attractive. And under Ryudo's banner, they could unscrupulously display their strengths. This was indeed a very tempting combination. Let's talk about something serious. After confirming the addition of this new partner, Sensible, who was sitting across from him and eating cream cake, asked, "Now the Rulon Group needs money and needs a business that can continue to make money. What do you think about this?" In terms of law, Sensible could be said to be an expert, but in terms of business he wasn't. If there was a need to solve some legal issues, he could provide help. When it came to making money, it wasn't Sensible's specialty. Well, if the Rulon Group needs to develop a business that can continue to make money, then the first thing to do is to find a relatively clean shell. After all, the Rulon Group name can't be used. At this point, Gao Yuan picked up a chocolate bar from the table, put it in his mouth, and crunched it into pieces. Chapter 77. In Gao Yuan's opinion, the extreme Tao of this era was very sad. Since the release of the Violent Group Countermeasure Law, groups that were blacklisted as designated violent groups were strictly monitored by the government and society, and it was difficult for them to engage in any open industry. Therefore, the designated violent groups could either turn over a new leaf, or slowly disappear on their own in a half-dead state, or they could simply go all the way and engage in the darkest industries such as guns, anesthetics, and organ trafficking until they rotted in the gutter. At this time, the Rulon Group was in the second situation, in a visible half-dead state, because of the double restrictions of the Violent Group Countermeasure Law and the chivalrous spirit. While the Rulon Group was declining, they were unwilling to engage in the darker industries. In the long run, naturally they could not make ends meet, and it was particularly awkward. In this situation, it was obviously quite difficult for the Rulon Group to make money. But it was not completely impossible. The designated violent group has too many restrictions and is not conducive to action. So first, we have to find some shell companies or companies that appear to be decent, and then let the members of the Rulon Group leave the group to join. This way, we can break up the whole group into parts, and at the same time, engage in some legal profiteering industries. That makes sense. Then what industry would be better? Well, if it's suitable for your line of work, can make money faster, and can be called a profiteering industry, first of all, a security company can be considered. Security company? Something like bodyguards. Personal bodyguard business is also included, but the security company itself has a wide range of services, from permanent staff to temporary guards, escorting cash, valuables, and so on. If you can get in touch with the business and political circles, then it's a business with limitless potential. According to Gao Yuan's knowledge, the annual profits of several large and medium-sized security companies in Tokyo were quite considerable, and the services they provided were not special. To put it bluntly, Whose money was the security company earning? It was the rich people's money. For example, providing security services for the rich when they go out. It was common for them to make a net profit of millions of yen. If he could cooperate with insurance companies and provide security services for companies or individuals who bought large amounts of insurance, or even get in touch with public authorities, it would be even faster than money laundering. However, to engage in this kind of business, one needed an extremely wide range of contacts and trustworthiness, as well as a large number of capable elite subordinates. This was not a business that ordinary people could do. A security company, that's doable. This is a very suitable way for me to earn money. Compared to Gao Yuan, Ryudo naturally knew more about his own situation. First and foremost, he was the young master of the Rulong Group, and he had his own special intelligence network and a group of capable subordinates. Secondly, with the help of Masato Takashi, who had eyes and ears in the business world, he could quickly open up cooperation channels in the business world and ensure that customers would come quickly. After that, there was Sensible, a detective hacker, who could invade the police department's system. He could immediately understand all the movements of the Tokyo Regional Police Department. At the same time, he was proficient in the law and could find many legal loopholes. After that, Ryudo also had a relationship with the young lady of the Tsukuderi Consortium, and he could buy a lot of high-tech weapons and equipment that were not circulated on the market. After that, the Kaneshiro clan could almost be said to control half of Nippon's political world. If Colored Glaze was willing to help, he could quickly establish a relationship with the government and ensure that the security company could set sail smoothly. This was great. The source of money and the huge network of connections were combined together. Ryudo could even hear the beautiful sound of money flowing quickly. At this moment, Sensible on the side asked in confusion, but even if the Rulong Group established a security company, it will still take some time to compete with the other established companies in Tokyo. It doesn't matter, as long as they lose their reputation. My reputation is ruined. I'm familiar with those security companies. Their crisis management and public relations capabilities are very poor. They are completely useless people lying in their comfort zone. So if they were attacked by unknown people in the recent mission, causing the mission to fail, and then the failure of the mission quickly spread to the streets and the internet, then their credibility will definitely plummet. Wow, so vicious, worthy of being a business ghost. Although Gao Yuan didn't say it explicitly, his meaning was very obvious. That was, if the Rulong Group established a security company, there was no need for other security companies in the Tokyo area. No matter what industry, no matter what era, the business of monopolizing was the most profitable. Coupled with the fact that Tokyo was full of rich people, as long as the oil was squeezed out of the rich people, the profits that could be brought by this oil was simply immeasurable. So Ryudo said decisively, "It's decided, let's do it. We'll leave immediately." Leave immediately? Where are we going? After hearing the boss's words, Sensible and Gao Yuan also stood up, but they didn't know where the boss wanted to go. To our new company, Rulong Security Company, the temporary office. Since it was a new company, even if it didn't have an office building, it should at least have a decent office. As for the location of the office, Ryudo actually thought about it a long time ago, because there was a ready-made office in front of him. However, the ready-made office still had the bright words BlackBerry Finance hanging on the door at this time. As long as someone passed by here, they would be puzzled by such a strange finance company. But if they were brave enough to walk in, what they saw would inevitably make them feel more puzzled. On the surface, this was just an ordinary office, with tables, chairs, stools, phones, computers, and other daily work appliances. However, the curtains that had never been opened and the thick soundproof door formed an isolated island here. An isolated island that was completely isolated from the outside world. The employees who worked on the island all wore ferocious looks and were dressed in sloppy and hooligan clothes. They used beautiful words to greet customers through the phone. "Remember, trash, you must return the money by tomorrow. Don't even think about running, or I'll burn your whole family. Hey, Mom, I caused some trouble outside and need some money. Hurry up and transfer the money to this account. What? You don't have a son? F***CKU. Hurry up and transfer the money. That batch of $100 bills? I'm dealing with it, don't worry. How can so many $100 bills be cleaned up so quickly? Can you get some $1,000 bills next time? When Ryudo, Sensible, and Gao Yuan stood at the entrance of the BlackBerry Finance, they seemed to be able to hear the friendly roar from inside through the thick soundproof door. Chapter 78. Is it just the three of us? Don't we need to find more people? When Gao Yuan came to the door of Conscience Finance, he couldn't help but gulp. He was timid to begin with. Not to mention, Ryudo didn't bring them here just to chat. From Gao Yuan's understanding of the Conscience Finance, the people inside were former members of the violent gang. After leaving the violent gang, they opened a finance company that specialized in loan sharks, debt collectors, money laundering, fraud, and other work. Although they were former members of the violent gang, they were undoubtedly a group of underground society members. They were a group of murderers that did whatever they wanted. But Ryudo said he wanted this office? He wanted to use this as the starting place for the Rulong Security Company? Did he plan to buy it with money? If that's the case, he would be ripped off. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Gao Yuan was thinking about this, Ryudo took the lead and knocked on the door with the simple Conscience Finance sign. Instantly, Gao Yuan couldn't help but take a step back. TSK, don't be such a coward. Mingji, who was beside him, chuckled after seeing his actions. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, our boss is the young master of the Rulong Group. He can call thousands of people with one phone call." That's true. Ha ha ha, don't be so nervous. Longdo also smiled brightly and said, "Actually, these underground financiers aren't that unreasonable. You just have to smile and deal with them, and you'll be fine." "Is that so? I see. Boss, you're right. I almost believed you." After hearing Ryudo's explanation, Gao Yuan forced a smile on his face, but the panic in his eyes didn't decrease at all. Bang! In the next moment, as the door was violently opened, a bald man wearing an old suit with a scar on his forehead walked out. Kid, what are you doing here? This isn't a place to play video games." When he saw 3 high school students standing outside the door, the bald scarred man's face showed an impatient expression. Ryudo smiled and said, "We are here for business. Anyway, let's go in first. It's not convenient to talk outside." "Serious business? I say, are you guys looking down on Extreme Dao, you bastards?" Suddenly the bald scarred man frowned. He quickly raised his hands and clasped them together, preparing to make crackling sounds to intimidate the other party. Unfortunately, Longdo's movements were much faster than his. Just as this guy raised his hand, a hard fist landed on his chin without hesitation. Under Sensible and Gao Yuan's dumbfounded gaze, Ryudo's punch sent the scarred bald man stumbling back through the door. After stumbling a few meters, he clutched his chin and fell to the ground, which Extreme Dao would specifically give a warning before beating someone up. Is this guy an idiot? But it also confirmed my conjecture. This group of gangsters who engage in Conscience Finance is just a group of amateurs. With this level of skill, they want to learn how to collect debts? After casually knocking down the first person he met to the ground, Longdo swaggered in, not recognizing even his own family. Looking at his posture, it was as if he didn't see anyone else in the room as a person. It was as if he was surrounded by a group of SpongeBob SquarePants. Other than the bald man who was knocked down, there were 3 other people in the room. One was a red-haired gangster, who wore a flowery shirt and dyed red hair. He looked like he failed to cosplay as Iori Yagami, and instead, he cosplayed as Eunuch Yagami. Another one was a strong man who held a phone in one hand and a dumbbell in the other. His huge muscles were as thick as a white shirt. He was not someone to be trifled with. The last one was dressed in a nice suit. His hair was neatly combed. At first glance, he looked like a white-collar worker, but the cunning expression on his face and the murderous glint in his eyes could not be hidden. When Longdo knocked the bald man down with a single punch, the other 3 people in the room immediately stood up from their chairs and looked over in unison. "Hey, brat, what are you doing? Do you want to die?" Seeing that his companion was beaten up, the red-haired gangster immediately picked up a baseball bat from the side and rushed over. Although this gangster looked naive, the baseball bat in his hand was strong and vigorous. It seemed like he often used this thing to beat people up. However, Ryudo didn't dodge the bat that was swinging towards him. Instead, he directly extended his right hand to block it. Is this guy crazy? Using his arm to block the bat's attack? Does he think he's a little golden man with copper skin and iron bones? Crack! Just when everyone thought that Ryudo's arm would definitely be broken, a crisp sound came from the bat. What's going on? In the next second, the red-haired gangster looked at the broken baseball bat in his hand. His eyes were about to pop out. How is this possible? This is a composite baseball bat, with a hardness close to an aluminum bat. Is this guy's arm made of steel? If it was a big guy with thick arms and thighs could do this, the others wouldn't be so surprised. But Ryudo's small 16-year-old arm could actually break the baseball bat? Isn't this too exaggerated? Are you shocked? This is the power of Krypton Gold. When everyone was shocked by this magical scene, Ryudo proudly raised his head. At the same time, he showed a painful expression. In fact, before coming here, Ryudo secretly bought 2 new passive skills from the Krypton Gold store: Iron Bone Mastery and Copper Skin Mastery. These 2 skills cost a total of 2 million, which made Ryudo's wallet flatten a lot. But the use of this money was quite obvious. At this moment, these 2 skills were described in Ryudo's skill pane. Skill pane, Iron Bone Mastery, can greatly increase bone hardness, 20% proficiency. Skill pane Copper Skin Mastery, can greatly increase skin hardness, 20% proficiency. With the existence of these 2 passive skills, Ryudo's physical strength naturally increased by a large margin. It was as if he practiced some kind of hard qigong. This skill combined with the LV3 physique, Professional Master Physical Fitness. To put it in an exaggerated way, even if he stood there and let people hit him, they might not be able to defeat him. Although it was not to the extent of the legendary Copper Skin Iron Bone invulnerable state, but his endurance was already quite shocking. Moreover, this was only under the condition that the proficiency of the 2 passive skills was only 20%. Chapter 79. Ryudo only had a preliminary understanding of skill proficiency. First of all, regardless of whether it was an active or passive skill, when first learned, the proficiency level was very low. For example, Furamaki-style martial arts was only at a pitiful 1%. As the proficiency level increased, its power and effect would naturally increase. But the process of increasing proficiency level was not easy. The first way to increase proficiency level was naturally to practice diligently. For example, continuously practicing Furamaki-style ultimate skill, Tiger Fall, would inevitably increase proficiency level. But this method of increasing proficiency level was very slow. After all, to truly master a martial art, it would take years as a unit of time. For Ryudo, who was at most 2 years away from the final battle, it was impossible to achieve his goal by just practicing diligently. Therefore, he could only place his hopes on the second method, which was the most practical and realistic method, which was to spend money. From the current situation, when buying a skill book, Ryudo could not only automatically learn the skill, but also obtain 20% proficiency level. In other words, as long as he continuously bought 5 identical skill books, he would be able to raise the skill to 100% proficiency level. At that time, he would truly be a master, majestic, invincible, and able to leap onto roofs and vault over walls. But skill books were not something that could be bought just because one wanted to. It was not even something that could be bought with money. After all, the items in the shop would only be refreshed after death, and it was also randomly refreshed. Therefore, in the worst-case scenario, Ryudo might need to continuously kill himself to crazily farm the shop in order to buy a skill book that he wanted. This was a bit too miserable. Of course, the investment in skills would also bring about huge returns. From this point of view, The benefits of skill books were extremely high in most cases. Especially when he saw the dumbstruck expression of the group of people in the office. Dragonhead felt even more awesome. Your baseball bat is not good. Buy a harder one next time. After blocking the bat, Ryudo casually grabbed the broken baseball bat, and without looking, smashed it at the red-haired delinquent's head. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound, the red-haired thug's hair turned even redder, as if he had enjoyed a free natural hair dye, and he fell to the ground and fainted. This brat was not an ordinary person. Seeing the tyrannical strength displayed by Ryudo, as well as the look of complete disregard on his face, the cunning-looking man in a suit could not help but grit his teeth. Therefore he asked in a cautious tone, "Who are you? What brings you here?" Ryudo chuckled when he heard this. He walked over to the table and sat down, propping his legs up high. Looking at that arrogant look, those who did not know would think that he was the boss of Conscience Finance. "What the hell are you? Speaking of which, did you scum ask for my permission to loan money here?" "What?" Ryudo's tone suddenly became very gloomy. His gaze towards the suited man also became incomparably cold. In an instant, the room seemed to be covered by a cold wind of ice and snow. It was as if they had come to the Siberian prairie, and there was a grass mud horse spitting on their faces. Lending money? Asking for permission? Wait, could it be that this brat is someone from the underworld? Although it was hard to imagine that a young man wearing a high school uniform would be someone from the underworld, his aura made people feel that he was not joking at all. After a moment, the suited man swallowed his saliva and sneered. "We are lending money here with the permission of the Rulon Group. Although I don't know which gang you are from, you should at least give some face to the Rulon Group, right?" When they heard the suited man's words, Sensible and Gao Yuan, who were slowly walking in from the door, widened their eyes. The Rulon Group was the largest gang in Tokyo. The name of this organization was naturally very intimidating. However, the problem was that the Rulon Group had never been involved in these kinds of dirty financial crimes. Otherwise, they would not be so poor. Sensible and Gao Yuan were naturally clear about this situation. So the suited man was putting on an act. Moreover, he was putting on an act in front of the young master of the Rulon Group. What was this? Flood the Dragon King Temple? Playing PR in front of Guan Yu? Thus, Ryudo smiled and waved his hand. He smiled and said, "Phone. Phone. Immediately call your backer. Pass the phone to me when the call is connected." Are you sure? This is not a joke. Immediately, a trace of panic appeared in the suited man's tone. After all, the backer he mentioned was a bluff from the start. Damn it, how could there be such a high school student? He was not even afraid of the Rulon Group. Clearly not long ago, the young master of that organization was... Young master? Wait, if I remember correctly, the young master of the Rulon Group, Ryudo Kiryu, is currently a high school student, right? Thinking of this, the suited man's eyes widened, as if he had seen a demon. A high school student in his teens with a head full of yellow hair. Although the legendary Tong Sheng Ryudo had a height of 2 meters and a physique comparable to a wrestler, if those exaggerated factors were ignored, the yellow-haired man in front of him was quite similar to the legendary young master Ryudo. He seemed to have noticed. After feeling the sudden change in the suited man's gaze, Ryudo continued to smile and said, "What? Why didn't you call me? I really want to see how strong your backer is." Cough cough, excuse me. If there's anything, why don't we talk over there? After glancing at his only remaining muscular subordinate and the other 2 high school students who walked in, the suited man made a difficult decision. He extended his hand and gestured at the president's office, not far away, inviting Ryudo in to discuss matters. Kacha. Whoosh. However, just as the 2 of them walked in, the suited man locked the door with the fastest speed possible. He pulled down the curtains, turned his head and jumped up. He did a full 360-degree spin in the air before kneeling down. "I'm very sorry, young Master Ryudo." The suited man knocked his head on the ground with a bang. His body trembled uncontrollably, and his tears and snot flowed out. "It's over. It's over. It's over." The man in the suit had been putting on airs outside, under the cover of the Dragon Group. Now he had directly bumped into the young master's face. Wasn't this the end for him? At this point, the only thing he could do was, "This is my entire fortune, and the deed to this house. Please be magnanimous and show mercy. Spare my life." Without waiting for Ryudo to say anything, the suited man obediently handed over a bag of cash and an envelope. Chapter 80. Just as Ryudo had thought, this group of people who set up a financial company to collect debts and swindle people were just a bunch of punks. Moreover, after they left their original gang, in order to avoid paying tribute, they definitely didn't dare to tell their original gang what they were doing. They could only use the name Rulon Group to fool outsiders. Therefore, when they found out that the young master of the Rulon Group was standing in front of them, it was easy to imagine how they felt. However, these people in the business of collecting debts and swindling people really made a lot of money. Ryudo casually took over the gunny sack that contained the man in the suit and quickly counted the money inside. There were bundles of $10,000 bills, adding up to a few hundred bundles. The amount here should be no less than 5 million. If the deed for the office was included, then this amount of money was indeed not small. Of course, in the suit man's opinion, this amount of money was worth it to buy his life. If he lost his money, he could earn it again, but if he lost his life, then it was over. "Take this guy outside and deal with the transfer procedures with my partner. Then take your men and scram." "Ah, yes, yes." After hearing Ryudo's words, the man in the suit finally let out a sigh of relief, because this meant that his life was finally saved. Speaking of which, making money like this was pretty easy. Why not start a new business of black eat black? When the man in the suit happily ran out and prepared to deal with the transfer of the office contract with Sensible, Ryudo silently thought while counting the money. The Rulon Group definitely couldn't casually do things like black eat black. Even if it was a punk without any background, if it was done too often, it would cause public outrage. After all, once or twice was fine. But if Ryudo went out every day to rob and extort other people, then it would only cause disgust and anger. At that time, no matter how powerful the Rulon Group was, they couldn't avoid it. Moreover, the Rulon Group had always prided itself as a chivalrous man. If his father found out that his son had been robbing others, he would probably be so angry that he would break out of prison and beat Ryudo up. However, even if the young master of the Rulon Group, Ryudo Kiryu, couldn't do it, it didn't mean that Ryudo himself couldn't do it. As long as he didn't reveal his identity when doing this kind of dirty work, then no one would know that it was Ryudo who did it. That would be fine. For example, wearing a Batman mask in the middle of the night, and then going out to punish evil and maintain the peace of Tokyo. This is a matter of course, right? While Ryudo Batman might do some cute little tricks like extortion while punishing evil, but probably no one would care. It was decided that he would go out and rob someone tonight. After counting the money, Long Do found that there was a total of 25 million yuan in the sack. A happy smile appeared on his face. After purchasing 2 passive skills, Ryudo's little treasury only had the extremely auspicious number of 44 million left. But after obtaining the man in the suit's entire net worth, it suddenly soared to 69 million. He was rich again in an instant. It felt like a needle poking through a needle. Knock knock. Just as Ryudo was enjoying his spoils of war, Gao Yuan knocked on the door and walked in. As expected of a real professional, he got a sum of money and a base of operations so easily. Looking at Long Do, who was sitting behind his desk leisurely counting money, Gao Yuan really felt like prostrating himself in front of him. It had only been about 5 minutes since the 3 of them entered Conscience Finance, and everything was over. Moreover, Long Do was the kind that beat people up as soon as he came in. Even so, the other party still had to obediently hand over the money and the deed, and then obediently carry their unconscious companion away. Was this the power of an extreme Dao expert? Ordinary hooligans were like ants in front of him. Seeing Ryudo quietly put on a show, Gao Yuan made up his mind to make the Rulong Security Company flourish and squeeze all the money out of the rich. I'll change the company's name and scope of business in a while. I'll also open a company account. Of course, I'll arrange for a few stand-ins with clean identities to stand on the surface. The three of us, and the Rulong Group, don't have to be involved. Speaking of which, Ryudo, Gao Yuan and Sensible's identities were very sensitive, and it wasn't convenient for them to appear publicly in various materials. However, Gao Yuan had been in the business world for so many years, so he naturally knew all kinds of tricks. For example, he could use stand-ins to deal with the legal person and person in charge of the company. All he needed to do was spend some money. Oh yeah, after opening the account, how much money should I transfer in? When Gao Yuan seriously talked about setting up the company, Ryudo suddenly remembered that the company needed a startup fund. Renovation, personnel expenses, equipment purchase, utilities, social relations, etc. If he calculated carefully, it wasn't cheap to set up a company. There were many things that he had to spend money on. Although the money was technically in the public account and should be paid by the Rulong Group, Ryudo knew that the Rulong Group was also very poor, so they probably couldn't fork out much money. If it really doesn't work, then I'll have to pay for it myself. Looking at the sack of money on the table, Ryudo showed a reluctant expression. Unexpectedly, Gao Yuan shook his head and said with a smile, "The first fund is expected to be injected about 100 million yuan. But this money doesn't need you or the Rulong Group to pay for it. I'll pay for it. 100 million? Wait, how can I let you pay for it? This is public money. It doesn't matter, just treat it as my investment. Anyway, I have no place to spend my money." Although they were discussing the flow of money in hundreds of millions, Gao Yuan's tone was still very calm. After all, he had helped other companies for so many years, and he had a lot of money on hand, and Gao Yuan himself wasn't the kind of person who liked to spend money. Compared to spending money, he preferred to earn money, and the more money he earned, the better. At the same time, Mingji walked in with all kinds of signed documents and started to discuss some of the legal issues involved in the transfer of the company. So this feeling was really magical. Half an hour ago, they were still discussing the establishment of the company in the coffee shop, and half an hour later, they were already doing it. Gao Yuan was a genius in the business world, and Sensible was an official undercover. With the two of them, many things were naturally not a problem at all. Next, as long as the Rulong Group sent people over, they could officially start the operation. When thinking about how many brothers to send over in the first batch, Ryudo suddenly discovered an important problem. Wait, I don't seem to have discussed with Uncle Fujiki about setting up a company to make money, right? Thinking of this, Ryudo couldn't help but scratch his head. Chapter 81. Although Tong Sheng Ryudo had the most say in the Dragon Group, and had become the young master and second-generation leader in many people's eyes, Tong Sheng Ryudo still had a lot of power. But in fact, he wasn't officially in position, and even if he was in position, many things had to be discussed with the consultant before he could start. He couldn't act on his own. In particular, Fujiki Yoshio, the old consultant, was one of the subordinates who had followed Tong Seiichi for the longest time. So Ryudo had to ask for his permission. So after returning to the Rulong Group headquarters that night, Ryudo found Uncle Fujiki and explained his plan to him. From meeting Gao Yuan and Sensible, two young and promising gods, to establishing the Rulong Security Company, and how to quickly squeeze money out of it. During the process, Fujiki Yoshio didn't say a word. He just silently smoked his tobacco pipe. The uncertain expression on his face made it difficult to figure out what the consultant was thinking. "Uncle Fujiki, what do you think?" After he finished, Ryudo looked at his expression and asked in an uncertain tone. In any case, Ryudo must convince Fujiki. Only in this way could this matter proceed smoothly. A few seconds later, Fujiki sighed deeply, put down the tobacco pipe in his hand, and asked in a vicissitude tone, "Young Master Ryudo, what do you think extreme do is?" Ryudo was silent for a while, then said firmly, "It's a group that is not accepted by today's society." In Ryudo's view, extreme do was a group of people who were exiled by society and could only live in the dark. It's the opposite, but Fujiki shook his head and smiled. It's not that extreme do is not accepted by society, but that the people who are not accepted by society form extreme do. Although the two of them were stating the same fact, the meanings they represented were completely different. In the view of ordinary people, because extreme do became extreme do, it was not accepted by society. However, from the very beginning, it was actually a group of people who were not accepted by society and went against the country, who chose to huddle together for warmth, thus forming the source of extreme Tao. There were many people who were out of touch with society and were not allowed to exist by the country, and there were many reasons for that. One of the main reasons was that he was disappointed in this rotten country. In the eyes of Fujiki and the other older generation of Jidao, Japan was a country with a broken backbone. From the top of the government to the bottom, they were all a bunch of dogs with broken backbones. When Tingmu was still very young, something like this happened to him. At that time, Tingmu was taking a tram to travel somewhere. There were a few tall and strong white men on the tram. They spoke fluent English and were shouting loudly without restraint. Tingmu, who couldn't stand the noise, stepped forward to stop them, but he was besieged by the strong men. In front of the hundreds of people on the bus, those strong men gave Tingmu a solid beating and even spat on his face. However, everyone around just hid far away. They didn't even dare to breathe, let alone stand up for Tingmu. Originally, Tingmu was beaten and his skills were not as good as others, so he accepted it. However, what really made him go to extreme do was what happened later. On the tram back from the trip, Tingmu saw a few other thin and weak young people also gathered together to make a noise. However, this group of young people didn't make a noise for long before the passengers on the surrounding trams besieged them, accusing them of breaking social rules, having no morals, no family education, and so on. From that moment on, Tingmu understood everything. The residents of Japan were like defeated dogs with broken backbones. When they met people who were weaker than them, they liked to straighten their backs, stand tall, talk about rules, morals, and other things to show their status. When they met people who were stronger than them, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. When they were stepped on, they didn't dare to make a sound. They chose to lower their heads and pretend that the feces on their heads were leftover curry. This was not a matter of one person, but the situation of the whole society and the whole country. The mentality of bullying the weak and fearing the strong was engraved in everyone's bones. Therefore, there was a need for extreme do, a need for this kind of tough guy who would not compromise with the strong and the powerful. In this abnormal country where everyone else lives on their knees and is proud of being enslaved by the strong, we extreme do are the only people who are standing because our knees are stiff, and we are born unable to kneel. Speaking of this, Tingmu reached out and patted his knees while sitting cross-legged. The standard sitting posture in the Rulon group was always cross-legged. Kneeling was not allowed. Because everyone else in this society was kneeling, extreme do could not kneel, so the Rulon group could not kneel. This principle was understood by Akima, Tingmu, and thousands of brothers. However, at this time, Ryudo said that he wanted the Rulon group to be engaged in some kind of security work. Wasn't this the same as being a dog for the rich and powerful? It was because they didn't want to kneel and be a dog that extreme do was exiled from society. If the price of making money was to turn back and be a dog, then it was better not to earn money. Although Tingmu didn't say it explicitly, his expression and tone clearly meant this. After feeling Tingmu's firm will, Ryudo didn't know what to say for a while. The Rulon group was a place for those who were not accepted by society to stand. Even if they were condemned by everyone, even if they were poor, they had to continue standing until the moment of their death. If even the Rulon group became a dog for the rich and the bureaucrats, then the last trace of benevolence in this country would disappear. Therefore, Tingmu didn't support the Rulon security company because he didn't want to earn money. What should I do? For a moment, Ryudo didn't know how to persuade Tingmu. After all, this man's will was still relatively firm. If only Lioli was here. She was smarter, so she would definitely be able to be smarter? That's right, I can do that. Just as Ryudo was thinking about how to persuade him, he suddenly thought of the reason why he wasn't smart. In the end, all of Ryudo's previous actions seemed to be unfathomable and planned. But in reality, they were all built on a full understanding of this world and other people. It was an open book exam. In terms of true wisdom, Ryudo was currently at the level of wisdom mortal scraps. At most, he was at the level of a normal person. What should he do now? Naturally, he had to upgrade his wisdom. After all, he had just received a sum of money not long ago, and his wallet was still relatively well off. Therefore, Ryudo immediately opened the system and entered the familiar attribute upgrade interface. Upgrading from LV1 resourcefulness to LV2 resourcefulness requires 5 million yuan. Are you sure you want to pay? Upgrading from wisdom to wisdom also required 5 million. It didn't feel like it was worth it. Forget it. After spending 5 million to upgrade wisdom, on the spot, accompanied by a faint light, Ryudo's brain felt a lot clearer. How should he describe this feeling? It was as if Ryudo's brain was filled with paste. Now that the paste was cleared, his thoughts gradually became clearer. Chapter 82. At the end of the day, what Fujiki couldn't accept was that the Rulon Group was working as a security guard to protect the corrupt higher-ups and the profiteers who exploited society. But what if the Rulon Security Company wasn't set up to protect them? So that's how it is. Is there such a clever way of speaking? After his wisdom was upgraded, Ryudo, who now had the LV2, wisdom, excellent passerby level of planning ability, thought for a while and thought of a way to persuade Fujiki. At this time, Fujiki saw Ryudo close his eyes and didn't say anything. He thought that his rejection hurt his self-esteem. Young Master Longdo, I can understand that you want to start a new business, but there are some things that you can't rush. The middle-aged man tried to persuade him. By the way, Uncle Fujiki, have you raised pigs before? Just when Fujiki was about to use his experience to talk a few principles to dispel Ryudo's idea, the latter suddenly said something very strange. Raising pigs? Why would I raise pigs? Fujiki didn't understand for a while, but he still shook his head decisively. Then do you know how to raise pigs? I have a rough idea. It's nothing more than letting the pigs eat and drink until they are white and fat. Finally, the pigs are slaughtered and eaten. Yes, and in addition to letting the pigs eat and drink well, you also have to build a safe pigsty for the pigs and let them slowly fatten up in it. That being said, what does raising pigs have to do with what we are talking about now? Of course, because the Rulong Security Company is like a safe pigsty, and we are the pig farmers. All the dignitaries and rich people who are served by us are the pigs in our pigsty waiting to be slaughtered. When saying this, Ryudo's face showed a strange smile, as if he was a villain who was planning something bad. Of course, in fact, he was indeed a villain, but this villain didn't take the money of the common people. He took the money of whoever had money. Dignitaries and rich people are the pigs in our pigsty waiting to be slaughtered? Upon hearing this, even Tung Mu, an experienced member of the Jianghu, could not help but widen his eyes. This was because these words did sound a little ridiculous. How could this be possible? But as Ryudo continued to explain the plan, Fujiki's eyes widened. They were almost like the eyes of an anime girl. According to Ryudo, after the Rulong Security Company entered the city, some of the elite members of the Rulong Group would secretly form a group called the Second Tokyo Pig Factory to harass the Tokyo dignitaries. Stalking, secretly taking photos, sending threatening letters, bombarding text messages, death threats, splashing paint, scratching cars, and so on. Anyway, as long as it was something that made people feel threatened, they would do it. As long as one had money and power, there were not many who were not afraid of death. Therefore, they would definitely strengthen the security around them, and even the security of their families and companies. And very coincidentally, not long ago, a few large security companies in Tokyo had negative reports. It was so widespread that everyone knew about it, making people uneasy to entrust their safety to them. At this time, the Dragon Security Company appeared quickly like a divine soldier descending from the sky, protecting all the frightened dignitaries. Amidst their happy smiles, the company took away the wealth of the people without shedding a drop of blood. Simply put, it was to ruin the reputation of the competitors, create false panic, take the opportunity to accept business, perfectly complete the mission. At the last step, the pigs were already in the pigsty. This whole set of interlocking strategies was the unruly business war system that the business ghost, Masato Takayama, was particularly good at. It perfectly illustrated his vicious method of not treating his competitors as human beings, let alone his customers as human beings. The next step was to repeatedly kill the pigs and eat their meat. As long as the pigs were in the pigsty, Gao Yuan had millions of methods to scrape off every inch of fat from the pigs. Of course, after doing this a few times, the dignitaries in Tokyo would definitely be suspicious. Therefore, after a period of time, he could also secretly buy several other declining security companies and quietly replace all of them with people from the Rulong Group. In this way, when the rich felt that something was wrong and wanted to go another way, they would find that no matter where they went, they were still in the hands of the Rulong Group. At most, they would go from one pigsty to another pigsty. This whole plan was named Tokyo Pigsty Plan by S. The purpose is not to provide protection for the dignitaries, but to extract the money they plundered from the common people. When talking about it, Ryudo couldn't help but slam the table, quite a bit of the spirit of the world. Of course, although Ryudo was speaking eloquently in front of Fujiki, in fact, the plan just now was just a temporary idea. It was true that Gao Yuan had made a complete plan not long ago, but he did not put forward the pigsty theory, nor did he have such a strange plan name as Tokyo Pigsty Plan. At the end of the day, this was just a set of excuses that Longdo deliberately made up with his clever brain, in order to justify his actions and turn them into chivalrous heroes. We are not dogs, we are just raising pigs, ready to kill pigs for meat at any time. This is not shameful at all. This robbing the rich to help the poor? It is indeed the style of a hero. After listening to Ryudo's explanation, Fujiki couldn't help but take a deep breath, as if there was a warm current surging in his chest. Seeing that Fujiki's vigilance had been lowered a lot, Ryuga quietly walked over and said with a smile, "By the way, do you know how much oil we expect to extract from the pigsty every year?" "How much?" "It should not be too much in the first year." "Oh, that's about?" "The current goal is to reach 200 billion in annual output, and it is expected to double in the second year." 2000. Poof. Suddenly, Fujiki couldn't help but jump up. It looked a bit funny, as everyone knew. Although the Rulong Group seemed to be prosperous on the surface, the organization was actually very poor. After all, they adhered to the principle of being a group leader, and no matter what, they would not be involved in the most profitable anesthetic business, gambling business, human or organ trafficking, financial fraud, and so on. Therefore, when he heard that he could make such a large amount of money in a relatively chivalrous way, Fujiki's expression was quite interesting. In the end, Ryudo struck while the iron was hot and asked, "Uncle Fujiki, can you imagine the scene of this room being filled with stacks of money? Furthermore, this is a righteous fortune earned through a righteous act." This. Originally, Fujiki wanted to insist, but there was no other way. The amount of money that Longdo described was simply too much. Therefore, in the evening, the proposal to establish the Rulong Security Company was successfully passed. Chapter 83. That's it. Our Rulong Security Company started to operate today. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. With Gao Yuan around, the business side of things isn't a problem at all. All kinds of procedures are like child's play. Moreover, he doesn't even need to show up. He just needs to rely on his phone. How advanced. Yeah. Sensible also found some foreign security instructors, through online channels, to train the brothers transferred from Rulong Group into professional security personnel. At the same time, they are also closely monitoring the situation at the police station to ensure that there will be no problems. Yeah. Uncle Fujiki has also said that he will fully support me. The brothers in the Rulon group are also very happy to receive a generous salary. They are all fighting to sign up for the company. In short, everything is going smoothly. Yeah. However, while all the students were enjoying lunch at Dori No. 1 High School, Kenzaki Colored Glaze was sitting upright on the carpet as he elegantly picked up his chopsticks. Her eating movements were neither fast nor slow, and her demeanor was elegant. However, her eyes never looked at the man sitting opposite her, who was talking animatedly. This strange situation had been like this ever since Ryudo saw her today. It didn't matter if Ryudo came to talk to her, or if they sat in the garden and ate together. In short, this young miss almost completely treated Ryudo as an invisible person. No matter what the other party said, she would just casually respond with two uns. What's going on? Colored Glaze seems to have a problem with me? Was she still angry? Seeing Lu Li's angry look, Long Do thought that she was angry because of what had happened the night before. At that time, because of some misunderstanding, Ryudo had sent her some ungentlemanly text messages. This was indeed a problem, but that was already the day before yesterday. Why was he still angry until now? Just as Ryudo was puzzled, the dancing costume standing next to him secretly revealed a happy smile. Stinky hooligan, big idiot, this is great. You've completely angered the young Mississippi. Looks like the young miss won't bother with you anymore, hee. Although Ryudo thought that Colored Glaze was angry about what happened the night before, Dancing Costume knew that she was angry about what happened yesterday morning. That's right, it was the shocking Tsukumori Union x Ryudo Kiryu, the greatest crime in history, that happened yesterday morning. When the eldest miss saw that everyone in the first high BBS forum was discussing the relationship between Union and Ryudo, her expression was very interesting. From the perspective of Dancing Costume, it was as if something that belonged to her had been snatched away by a woman who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. To put it simply, he was jealous, and he was extremely jealous. Even if Dancing Costume didn't want to admit it, he could see that the eldest miss cared about Ryudo more or less. Therefore, after a day had passed, the eldest miss's resentment and jealousy clearly didn't disappear at all. It might even continue to ferment. Ryudo Kiryu, this is the price you have to pay for having 1 foot in 2 boats. Accept your punishment, bastard. Looking at the eldest miss's calm expression, but in fact, her face was surging with emotions, Dancing Costume secretly laughed. Perhaps it was because Ryudo had just gained a wave of wisdom yesterday. His brain finally filled up a little bit. He gradually smelled the sour smell of jealousy. Could it be that the eldest miss is jealous? Is it because I went to school with senior sister Union yesterday morning? So she doesn't want to bother with me now. After understanding this, Ryudo sighed and said to Colored Glaze, who was drinking tea, Colored Glaze, I like you. Pft. Suddenly, the tea in Colored Glaze's mouth spurted out from her nose. Cough cough. She quickly took the handkerchief from Dancing Costume's hand, wiped the tea in her nose and said angrily, You! Are you crazy? Originally, Colored Glaze planned to use a cold face to face Ryudo to make him back off. But this bastard actually said, I like you without batting an eyelid? And he said it in front of Dancing Costume? Straight ball. This wasn't a simple straight ball. It was simply a super invincible straight line explosive tornado ball, the kind that almost made Colored Glaze's face crooked. But Ryudo was not aware of this, because this was a very normal thing to him. So he smiled indifferently and said, I'm a man. If I like you, then say I like you. If I don't like you, then say I don't like you. My words are worthy of the heavens, worthy of the earth, and worthy of myself. What's wrong with that? Because his attitude was too matter-of-fact, Colored Glaze didn't know how to respond. After a while, Lu Li sighed and said, I know your intentions, but since you like me, then you shouldn't have done it with senior sister Yun Yin yesterday. Yes, because I also like her, so it's normal to go to school with her. Nanny. What? Just when Ryudo said, I also like Yun Yin and Tsukigami, in a serious manner, Colored glaze and dancing costume were stunned and made strange questioning sounds. Did I hear it wrong? Just now this kid said in front of Miss that he also likes Yunyan and Sakigami? Moreover, it was added immediately after he had said that he liked the young miss? Dancing costume couldn't help but open her mouth wide, with a look that said, "Are you King drunk?" After all, how could there be such a man in this world? Although there were many men who had one foot in two boats, a man who dared to say that he liked another woman in front of the person he liked was simply a monster in history. But compared to dancing costume, who was so shocked that her eyeballs almost popped out, colored glaze was obviously much calmer. She was stunned for a moment, then asked in a tone that said she didn't know whether to laugh or cry, "What is this? Are you announcing to me that you haven't made up your mind? That you haven't made a choice between me and Yunyan?" No, I've already made my choice." "Then what is your choice?" "I want both. You and Yunyan are members of my harem." As if he didn't care how shocking his words were, Ryudo said in public without blushing or panting. Indeed, polygamy did exist in this world, and many neon officials and nobles did have several wives in secret. But a weirdo like Ryudo, who dared to directly tell the person he liked that he wanted to marry other wives, was hard to find in the world. "Don't you think this is unfair to me?" After a few seconds of silence, colored glaze asked. "Indeed, but my feelings for you are loyal. I think that when you have feelings for multiple women, you no longer have the right to talk about loyalty. But at least I openly express my desire to start a harem, and let you have a full understanding of it before that. Compared to those indecisive and deceitful men, I'm much better, right? From this point of view, my feelings are loyal, and without a trace of deceit." Even if he was talking about such a shameless thing, Ryudo's tone was still sonorous and powerful. Chapter 84. From the very beginning, Ryudo never hid his love for these female leads. No matter if it was Kanzaki-colored glaze, Sakujiri Yunyan, or Saitu Dunya, who was about to transfer over, they were all very important to him. "The three of you are my wings. I want to start a harem, and I want the three of you to accept it openly. This is the confession of me, the six-winged angel Ryudo Kiryu." Of course, such an idea that clearly went against the times might not necessarily be accepted by others. No matter if it was colored glaze, Yunyan, or Dunya, they were all perfect girls in terms of appearance, personality, and family background. It would be the fortune of 300 lifetimes for a normal person to marry even one of them, let alone all three of them. Would the three of them be able to accept Ryudo's greedy desires? The answer was still unknown. But even so, Ryudo would continue to work hard and use his own hands to open a path to a harem. Even if none of the three of them were willing to date him because of this, Ryudo would accept it. He could only blame himself for not being able to do it. No matter how one looked at it, Ryudo's elementary school-like concept of, "I want all of them," was definitely problematic. But colored glaze felt that such a concept of love was very similar to this extreme Dao young master. If he liked something, he would work hard to fight for it. He would never lie to himself or others, even if it seemed a little shameless. After all, Ryudo was not a person who cared about his reputation. But she still turned her head and said in an emotionless tone, "We're done eating. Hurry up and leave. I still have things to do." "Okay, I won't disturb you." Although he did not know if colored glaze could accept his words, Ryudo felt that it would be better to give her some time to think about it. However, just after Ryudo left, colored glaze picked up her mobile phone and dialed an unfamiliar number. Beep beep. "Oh, it's Miss Colored Glaze. You rarely call me. What's the matter?" "Uncle Suzuki, I have a good friend who owns a company. However, his background is not very clean, so he may be involved in some inspection problems. I hope you can take care of him." "So that's how it is." "No problem. In the Tokyo circle, my old bones still have some use. Then I'll leave it to you. I'll ask my assistant to send over the company's information in a while." After exchanging a few more pleasantries with the person on the phone, colored glaze hung up. But the moment she hung up the phone, she saw dancing costume's stunned expression. Others might not know who Yuli was calling, but it was impossible for Dancing Dress to not know. After all, the Uncle Suzuki she mentioned was the current governor of Tokyo. He was an extremely high-ranking official in the Tokyo administrative area and was responsible for all matters in Tokyo. In other words, he was the real leader of the Tokyo area. The power he held was unimaginable to the average citizen. However, just now, Colored Glaze asked this uncle she knew since childhood to take care of Ryuto's company, and it was when the latter had just issued a harem declaration. First of all, without a doubt, with the governor of Tokyo looking after it, even if it was just a few words, it would save Ryuto and the others a lot of trouble. But why did Colored Glaze do this? Wasn't she angry just now? Miss? He already treated you like this, why do you still? He's angry with me, but I still have to do what I have to do. It's better to separate personal feelings from the overall situation. However, although Colored Glaze said he's angry with me on the surface, her emotions were obviously a lot calmer. After all, honesty was the most important thing in getting along with people. She could see that Ryuto's words were sincere. Even if it was unpleasant to hear, it was what he thought. Compared to secretly having a mistress after getting together with Colored Glaze in the future, or having an unclear relationship with other people outside, Ryuto obviously thought that it would be better for both parties to be honest with Colored Glaze before they started. Really, I don't know if I should call him smart or an idiot, but if he really wants to take me and Union together, then I'm afraid only a man who has dominated this country can do it. On one side is the next vegetarian king of Kamiyoshi, a girl who is forbidden to marry. On the other side is the precious daughter of the Tsukuderi Consortium, the carefree daughter who has been strictly watched since childhood. To take these two women into the palace at the same time, the difficulty was no less than taking the head of the emperor and using it as a toilet. Therefore, at this moment, Luli was looking forward to it even more. She wanted to see if the future Dragon Battle Royale could reach this stage. Under the influence of these various thoughts, the clear day quickly passed, and night once again shrouded the earth. Today was a fairly normal day in Tokyo, other than a company called Rulong Security Company, quietly preparing to go online. Everything was so normal. In the dark night, the faint moonlight was like a gauze hanging down, shrouding the backyard of the Rulong Group headquarters in the middle of the night. There was only a small table lamp in Ryuto's room. Looking in from the outside, it was difficult to see what the person inside was doing. Under the dim light, the young master was wearing a dark long-sleeved trench coat, black gloves, black boots, and a hat on his head that covered his yellow hair. Almost his whole body was wrapped in darkness. In addition, this guy also wore a white jade mask that covered almost half of his face. It looked like a role-playing prop. This made his face faintly discernible, and it was difficult to see his specific features clearly. This white jade mask looked very special. Not only did it cover half of the face, but there was also a small protrusion on the mouth, like a small microphone. In fact, it was really something similar to a small microphone, because it could make a noticeable difference in the sound. Ahem, good evening, have you eaten? After putting on the mask, Ryuto casually said such a sentence to the air. A slightly hoarse and mature voice echoed in the air. It was completely different from Ryuto's usual voice. Not bad, the 500,000 yuan was worth it. After confirming that this rogue voice-changing mask was effective, Ryuto nodded slightly. The mask on his face was a new product that he bought from the Karma Mall not long ago. After wearing this mask worth 500,000 yuan, not only could it cover the face, but it could also change the voice, making it impossible for people to recognize who the person was. It could be said that it was a must-have for rogues. Of course, Ryuto didn't dress up like this for rogues, but to uphold justice. Chapter 85. After tasting the sweetness of BlackBerry Finance, not long ago, the dragon had realized that the gangsters who did the dirty work were quite rich. For example, BlackBerry Finance was 6 million. If there were 10 of them, wouldn't it be 60 million? Wouldn't 100 of them be as much as 600 million? Therefore, before the Rulong Security Company was on the right track, Ryudo planned to use this to make some money. Therefore, with the sense of justice of punishing evil, he prepared to enter the streets at night to see if he could get rid of the evil. It's about time. Let's go. After confirming that he didn't miss anything, Ryudo turned off the table lamp and jumped out of the window. Jumping over walls was a common occurrence for him. When the cold wind of the night blew on Ryudo's face, it even brought a feeling of satisfaction. Under the cover of the moonlight, the young man rushed out of the Rulong Group headquarters with extreme speed and sneaked into the streets of Tokyo. Under the night sky, Tokyo was a city that never slept. Neon lights flashed here, and most of the streets were still lit up. But under the lights, there was still an unconcealable evil churning, waiting for the people of the night to save it. Phew, 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 help, help. When the hour hand of the clock pointed to 2 a.m, at a remote corner outside a bar, a woman who looked gaudy was panting as she squatted against the wall. Her mouth kept calling for help, just as the woman, who looked to be in her early 20s, leaned against the corner and shivered. 3 gangsters who looked sloppy and almost had "I'm not a good person" on their forehead walked over with a smile. Hee hee, what's there to run for? We just want to have some fun with you. We won't do anything to you. Their lips curled up into a wretched arc, and their tone was extremely insulting. It was easy to imagine what would happen later. It was already late at night, and there weren't many people passing by this alley. If this continued, wouldn't the girl fall into the devil's claws? However, just as the leader of the group was about to grab the woman and forcefully pull her into the depths of the alley to have some fun. "Hey guys, do you have any money?" A hoarse voice suddenly drifted over from the wall above them. "Who is it?" The leader hurriedly looked up at the top of the wall. Under the dim light of the street lamps, a dark figure appeared there. On top of the wall that was more than 2 meters high, a man who was almost completely wrapped in black sat there, as if he was watching a joke, looking down at the 4 people below. "You! What the hell was that? Are you acting by dressing up like this? You must have gone to the wrong set. Or are you crazy?" After seeing the uninvited guest's appearance, the leader instinctively cursed. But just at the moment when he just cursed, the man above Ryudo had already jumped down from the wall that was more than 2 meters high and directly stepped on the head of the gangster closest to him. It was needless to say how strong the impact of a person jumping down from a 2-meter-high wall was. The gangster only saw the shadow on his head quickly become bigger. Then there was a sharp pain on his forehead, and he immediately lost consciousness. Bastard. Just after Ryudo took the lead and killed one person, another gangster standing next to the leader immediately made his move. He picked up a glass bottle from the garbage next to him and smashed it at Ryudo's head without hesitation. Just as he was halfway through swinging the bottle in his hand, an iron-like hand grabbed his wrist and forcefully twisted it downwards. Kacha! Ah! With the crisp sound of bones, the gangster's wrist was broken on the spot, and he fell to the ground crying while holding his wrist. After seeing Ryudo kill his 2 underlings in the blink of an eye, the leader couldn't help but take a half step back, and there was obvious fear in his eyes. For a group of street thugs like them, being able to clearly identify the strength of the other party was actually a very important skill. Otherwise, if they were to bump into an iron plate one day and die, that would be a bit too stupid. Judging from the current situation, they should have hit a metal plate. Moreover, this metal plate was solid. It was F*King hard. So he couldn't help but ask, "Who are you? What is your purpose?" "I am the messenger of justice, the black hero who maintains the order of this city." "Black hero? Maintain the order?" "Yes, now leave all the valuable things on you and your companions, and then take them away." "Wait, you have the nerve to call yourself the messenger of justice, bastard? Black hero? Robber?" At this time, the leader silently ridiculed in his heart, but he quickly took out a very sharp sawtooth military knife from his waist. This sawtooth military knife was a high-end product he bought from the black market at a high price. It was very sharp and full of murderous aura, the kind that ordinary people would immediately pee their pants when they see it. You, however, Just as the leader was about to struggle with the weapon, his eyes suddenly widened. Because the moment the leader raised his head, a black pistol was already pointed at his lower body. You took out this knife. What are you going to do? Ryudo asked with a smile when he pointed the gun at the opponent's vital part. There are hundreds of martial arts, but this is the spear technique. When the opponent is unprepared, attack the penis. You use a weapon, I also use a weapon. You use a knife, I use a gun. This is very fair. You, look at this military knife, isn't it good? I was just going to take it out to show my filial piety to you. And the money on them is all for you. When the gun was pointed at him, the leader's expression became very flattering, and he quickly and skillfully searched for all the valuable things from the two underlings on the ground. Wallet? Take it away. Throw away the useless ID. Watch? Take it away. But don't want the electronic watch, it's not worth much. Phone? Take it away. Remove the SIM card and throw it in the smelly ditch. Gold and silver ornaments? Take it away, take it all away. In the end, even the sawtooth military knife in his hand was put into a bag, and after respectfully handing it over, the leader said with a bitter smile, "That, Mr. Black Hero? Can I go now?" Ryudo weighed the weight of the goods in his hand, and said with satisfaction, "Well, it was a pleasure working with you, get out." Just like this, the messenger of justice and the street thug reached a consensus. The latter carried his companion with a complicated expression and ran away. The messenger of justice took a bag full of valuables and walked toward the woman, who was almost hurt. When the woman realized that the hero saved her, she also showed a happy smile and said to him with a smile, "That I'm very grateful." Cut the crap. How much money do you have? Throw it all into the bag. What? After hearing the words that obviously didn't sound like a hero, the expression on the woman's face froze. Chapter 86. Something's wrong with this? Aren't you the hero of justice, Black Hero? Why do you want money from me, the victim? When he saw her expression, Ryudo asked impatiently, "Do you think I look like your father?" "No, you don't. Since I'm not your father, why should I save you for free? It seems. Since I saved you, you should give me some compensation. This is very reasonable, right?" This seems to sound quite reasonable. But since she got rid of the fate of being insulted, the woman had nothing to say. She could only obediently throw all the valuable things into the bag, including cash, jewelry, and even mobile phones. She basically didn't leave anything valuable behind. After taking out a few hundred yen for the woman to take the tram back, Ryudo quickly disappeared into the darkness, leaving only a righteous figure carrying a bag of money. Not bad, it's quite heavy. After weighing the heavy bag in his hand, the dark hero showed a happy smile. This was a business. It was definitely not the only one Ryudo did tonight. It was even the simplest one among the hundreds of orders he would do next. After feeling the sweetness of this kind of thing, the messenger of justice, Black Hero, began a crazy day and night money-making journey in the next 5 days. Because the Rulong Security Company was still in preparation, Ryudo had nothing to do during the day. He usually went to school as usual, and then slept in the classroom. At noon, he went to find colored glaze to eat, and in the afternoon, he went to find Yunyen to talk about books. He was a scumbag trying to capture 2 female protagonists in a love game. But in the evening, the night in Tokyo, Ryudo's wonderful nightlife began. Under the dark night, the messenger of justice, Black Hero quickly passed through the streets and alleys of Tokyo and carried out a crazy search for those who obviously didn't look like good guys. As long as it was a gangster who didn't look like a good guy, whether they were doing bad things or not, Ryudo would make a move on the spot. After beating someone up, they would take all their belongings. They would not let go of any valuable items. During the day, Ryudo would roll up all the valuables in gunny sacks and hand them over to Gao Yuan. He would have someone transport them to the black market overseas and sell them. Gao Yuan was also curious as to where Boss had gotten so many watches, accessories, phones, and other miscellaneous gadgets. But he still faithfully found someone to sell all these goods by mail, and all of them were exchanged for clean cash through various channels. It had to be said that Gao Yuan's ability in financial management was indeed quite excellent. Even if a large number of goods were shipped to the black market abroad to be sold, no one could find out the origin of the goods, let alone find out who the seller was. Just like that, Ryudo's wallet became richer day by day, and the speed was extremely fast. Phew, it's another day full of riches. When the morning of the 6th day arrived, Ryudo dragged his tired body and a big sack of messy things back to his room. He then sat down on the ground, upholding justice, fighting crime. This kind of work was really tiring, but making money was also really making money. 4 or 5 consecutive nights, almost every time the clock rang at 1 o'clock in the morning, Ryudo would wear the black hero costume and appear in the streets of Tokyo to fight for justice and money. According to incomplete statistics, the number of gangsters that Ryudo carried out justice during this period of time was in the hundreds. The intercepted goods were also in the hundreds. Logically speaking, this level of large-scale robbery should have caused a large degree of public opinion, but in fact, it did not. First of all, the gangsters that the boss chose were not good people, and the amount of money obtained from them wasn't much. After all, no one would bring hundreds of thousands or millions of items when shopping. At most, they would have some cash in their wallet, some rings, necklaces, cell phones, and other valuables. For those gangsters who often walked by the river, this kind of situation of being robbed and extorted could be said to be a common occurrence. As long as there was no serious injury or death, even they themselves wouldn't take this matter to heart, let alone calling the police. This kind of thing was too common in Tokyo at night, and the police were too lazy to care about them. However, after experiencing Ryudo's crazy justice enforcement, the number of gangsters strolling in the alleys in the middle of the night had significantly reduced. Perhaps many people also knew that there was such a psychopath who was specifically targeting the unlucky people who were alone. But this had nothing to do with Ryudo. Anyway, the money in his hands was a real benefit. He now had to think about how to spend the money. After putting a new sack of dropped goods in the corner of the room and preparing to send it to Gao Yuan to sell, Ryudo lay on the bed and opened the system interface, ready to spend a long time. After all, after 5 days of farming time, now Ryudo's personal attribute panel had become like this. Name: Ryudo Kiryoichi, 16 years old. Attributes: Wisdom LV2, Physique LV3, Courage LV2, Insight LV1, Charm LV2. Title: Beginner Assassin, obtained after 100 successful sneak attacks. Presence reduced by 20% when equipped. Equipment: M9 pistol. Good. Taser stun gun. Good. Dragon tooth serrated knife. Good. Tools: Gangster Velcro, Gangster Analysis, Mirror Skills, Furamaki Style Martial Arts, Iron Bone Mastery, Copper Skin Mastery. Total assets: 31,217,800 yuan. How to describe it? It was a kind of earth-shaking change, right? First of all, because of the large number of sneak attacks, Ryudo received a new glorious title: Beginner Assassin. This title could reduce presence, which was to make it difficult for others to notice you. It was a quite useful special ability when carrying out some secret operations. Secondly, the equipment on his body was also changed into something quite good under the condition of Uncle Fujiki. For example, the small, light, high accuracy, and 15 rounds of ammunition capacity M9 pistol, and the taser stun gun that could shoot an electric dart to electrocute people. These were all equipment that was difficult for ordinary people to get. As for the last dragon tooth serrated knife, it was a loot that Ryudo looted when he went out to do justice for the first time. Because of the good quality, he didn't sell it, but kept it for his own use. Of course, other than the rewards from the title and equipment, the biggest reward was naturally the small treasury that was now filled to the brim. It was filled with real money. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.